Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, August 7th. We'll call to order at 6:33 p.m. First item of business is surplus equipment request, police refrigerator, third read.
I have no concerns.
No concerns here.
I'd like to make a motion.
Sure, I'll make a motion to deem the Tac Life mini refrigerator from the police department as surplus property and to dispose of appropriately.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Review of the police department policy, 1.1. 1.15, handling juveniles, second read. Chief was not available tonight, but I did speak with him a little bit. He had some concerns about changing the child juvenile, him, her, because of what it refers to, and wants to discuss that with us in more detail at our next meeting. So he'll be here on the 21st, and we can walk through some of that. I think that was the majority of the feedback from our last one. Is there any new feedback or questions or anything that we should have him ready for next meeting?
I made a couple of notes. One, just because I know he'll either watch this or ask if there was any concerns about it.
Mm-hmm.
Under definitions in B, and then all the way down, the last one where it was just a note before it jumps into section C. It says individual police departments are advised to consult. That's a note that comes from the creator of the policy, indicating, I think it just either needs to be rewritten and tailored to Erving. We don't care about the other individual police departments. It should be rewritten, to capture what the essence of it is, but make it more specific to Erving. So that was one. And you said there was some concerns with changing, like he, him, she, her.
I think it was just changing them all to juvenile.
Oh,
Not
instead of
specific
child, yeah.
to the words per se, but the child to
Okay.
juvenile and the references all over to juvenile.
Okay. So
Not specifically maybe him, her, and them, they, or whatever,
then-
something
then
like
there is
that.
one
But it's
in-
more of the
under youthful
child
offender,
versus juvie.
third line down, where it says against the law of the Commonwealth, which, comma, if he or an adult,
oh,
either he, she, or they.
They, yeah.
One of the, whatever we're using throughout. And I do have some concerns with, I read his response about why he didn't change some of it.
Okay.
I think I'd actually like to have that conversation with him, so we'll just hold off on those until the 21st.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured it was better to have that dialogue, and said it'd be best to do here
Yeah.
at the future meeting.
I agree with that, but just as the grammar person that I am, I'll hold off on everything else except for this. Section C, item 5, second to last line, Department of Children and Family Services. The words Department, Children, Families, and Services should be capitalized, as it is a formal agency. Section F, item 1, just to add a line in between C and D, as everything else is double space, so that should be consistent. And the remainder of my commentary I'll hold until we can have that dialogue with the chief.
Okay. I don't recall if this was a superseding. I don't remember the answer to that question. This is a superseding from our existing policy?
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay.
which was 2005 and then amended 2014, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And we should capture
Okay.
that history in the header. There's a section for issue date
Yeah.
revision.
Right.
We should capture that.
Okay. All right, next is meeting minutes from July 24th, 2023. Did everyone get a chance to review them?
Yes.
Just
No
very high
concerns.
level.
Okay. Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 24th, 2023 as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Review and issuance of the second water commitment for FY24.
Sorry, I didn't have them in that order. Give me 1 second.
Make a motion, we approve the second water commitment for fiscal '24 in the amount of $2,000 for new water service charges at 18 Pleasant Street.
Second.
Any concerns?
No concerns.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Surplus equipment, request of battery backup first read, and town hall draperies first read. Any questions, concerns?
No questions.
None.
Okay. Review of buildings and ground maintenance position vacancy. Glenn, come on up.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Great.
So we have the highway building and ground maintenance vacancy. After the promotion of Cody. And we have that job description in here for review. That is pretty recently revised, about 2 years ago. So, anything in that job description of note or concern?
No.
For you, sir, anything?
I have no concerns with it, no?
Is this consistent? Maybe I'm missing it. I know in the other job functions we listed certain first aid requirements or
As we're reviewing all these, I believe we're adding that to all of them.
I was thinking the same,
Yes.
and I couldn't recall whether we decided we'd just do it in mass or if we did it as we reviewed them. I don't remember what we did the last time.
I think both options were thrown out there.
Exactly. I don't know where we landed.
I would just make the point that it should be consistent with the language we've previously talked about. We can certainly research that and come up with it.
Yeah. Agreed. Anything else on that?
Nope.
Do you have one handy? Did we do it in the prior ones or no?
Yeah, you want the language?
No, just wanted to know if it was there so we could approve it as amended or not. What the language is.
Actually,
We
I
use the
think-
same language. We're not gonna, I
It's
don't
the
think we're
same-
gonna change
I
that.
think it was done in the foreman's,
Yeah. You
Yeah.
want
was
me
the
to
most recent one.
read it to you?
Sure.
Stand by.
Just for clarification, make sure I heard you correctly. When you said this vacant position, it was due to the recent promotion of Cody, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yep.
So the language that was added to the highway foreman's position is a requirement for OSHA 10 training and bloodborne pathogen training, as well as CPR and first aid certification is preferred.
And so that was under the minimum qualifications? Or that was under the
Special requirements.
Special requirements? Okay.
Correct.
Got it. So that's the only proposed edit, is to include that language? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the highway building and ground maintenance labor job description as amended.
Thank you.
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then there's a recommendation.
Yes, so along with that, we're looking for another recommendation to promote from within. David Lambert, which is currently now the building grounds maintenance custodial person for the library and the senior center. David has a lot of construction knowledge, many years, retired mason, been to all aspects of building, right from the dirt work all the way up to building. I believe he was involved at actually the Turners Falls High School, the middle school edition also. When David came here for the current position he holds, we knew he was overqualified, but he was happy with doing the job. He's still happy with doing the job, but he sees now that there's an opportunity for him to grow. He's done work with us already. On the highway department side, he has stepped in for the plowing side of it also this past winter, when we had some big heavy storms. And I think he would be a great asset to the highway building grounds maintenance department. So I would very strongly recommend promoting David to that new position, to that vacant position. And we know that that would leave a vacancy here. We can talk about that afterwards. But he would not leave this position until it was filled,
Right.
if you accept the recommendation.
Same as we've done so far. We've
Correct.
got to backfill before we move.
Yep.
Right.
And David already holds his hoisting license, which is required. 2 of them.
It's nice to have a known commodity rather than question.
Absolutely. Well, he's got a lot of experience.
And he's willing to learn what he doesn't know also.
I don't have any concerns with that transfer.
Okay. Same?
Same, no issues.
Would one of you like
It's
to
all
make a
about,
motion?
it's all about the effective date.
So we didn't put one in there because we know
Because we
we
don't
would have
know.
to advertise for this, and then be given some time for a little cross-training also.
Advertise for the backfill.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Any preference on language to accommodate that?
He's not prepared for that question.
Well, and I would say there's some time involved, but I think we should set a finite date on when it's effective. What that means in how the work transition goes, I think, can be separate. Because there's going to be some overlap time and
Correct,
things
but-
like that.
So we're
So
talking about not having that transfer go until it's backfilled here.
It usually takes at least a month to fill a position.
No,
With the-
regardless, we can, I think your point is we can make it effective immediately.
We can make it
His
effective
role-
separate than.
His
than-
role can still be in the
Okay.
interim, filling this role under the title of whatever. And you have that discretion to say, until somebody replaces you as your supervisor in this role, I want you to continue doing what you're currently doing until, that just makes it easier to,
That's kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's Like we can just determine a date that we feel is like, hopefully we'll be starting to transition by then, but either way, not hold off indefinitely, you know, I mean, we'll sort through that, right?
I'm
To
okay.
give it something, but I don't, we can go either way, we can wait.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the current position is not a full-time equivalent? It's a part?
It is.
So-
Yeah, he's
both
full-time.
full-time.
He's 40 hours now.
Full-time.
Oh, he's 40 now, and it would
Yes.
be 40 then?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, makes my suggestion of doing a 50-50 until
Yeah.
it's filled moot, so.
And my point, I think he's, I don't know what the grade is for his
C.
current. For his
Oh,
current,
current,
No, not current.
current is B, I think.
B,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think we can make the change effective whenever, and then you transition. The date of transitioning out of the current role into his new role is contingent on a multitude of factors, and that can happen anytime after the appointment date. I'd
Okay.
be fine if we figured out what the next payroll cycle is and just attach it with that. You know, 2 weeks, whatever. I don't,
It would be the end of this week.
Saturday, the 12th, will start the next payroll period.
so, Monday, the 14th.
It starts on Saturday. Payroll starts Saturday.
Right, but he's not working Saturday or Sunday.
Correct.
So.
We hope not.
Right. You shouldn't be coming in on
Not
those
yet.
days. Not yet. It's not that time of the season. I mean, I'd be fine with August 14th,
August 14th.
if anybody has any concerns with that. And then leave the actual transition of leaving this role up to the superintendent when we go through that process of getting it backfilled.
I think that's kind of what we did with the last ones,
Yeah.
similar. Works for me,
You good?
I'm good.
Yep.
All right, I'll make a motion to appoint David Lambert to the vacant Highway Building and Grounds Maintenance Laborer position, effective August 14th, 2023, grade C, step 1, at a rate of $23.70 per hour.
I'll second that.
Did we capture everything you needed in there?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Review of the highway truck upfit quote. And just a footnote to what you may have missed or caught, Mr. McCrory said, we will talk later about that position vacancy and what the department structure in the later discussion in the joint meeting.
Yes.
Some recommendations about how we approach that.
So when we put the truck out to bid, we came back with a total cost. It was 109,000 and change. And the motion was a not to exceed 110,000, I believe. It was just one bidder. Thomas and I went down to the upfitter's location right after the truck was delivered down there. And as we were going through our build sheet, the most expensive part on here for the cutting edge of the $3,450, I'll take that responsibility. I thought it was put into the original quote for it. What this is a segmented cutting edge, so they're 1-foot segments on the plow. They're carbide, and we have them on 3 trucks right now, and we're working on our 4th year on the same cutting edge without changing them. Where the typical steel ones, we're about 6 of them a year, probably about $2,400 a truck.
6 per year?
6 per year. So this is, that 3450 is all me. I thought it was in the original quote, and it was not. So what it was, the way it was bid out was just a regular steel cutting edge.
That's the Polar Flex Edge.
The Polar Flex Edge is the one that we have on the trucks now, yes. So as we got down there, when they quoted out the safety lights system on it, it was 2 facing forward, 2 facing rear. The last 2 trucks we built, we've had side markers on them. but 2 front, 2 rears, it's all that's required. We've kind of like to have side markers on them also for flashing lights. So the extra lights you see on here, that's what those are for. Those are for side marker lights and 2 additional ones in the grill. There's another light on here. We can thank the new cruisers for this. They have a remote light that's up on the driver's side front fender right at the cowl that can face all around up in the trees, 360 degrees. With the recent storms that we've been out in at nighttime, summertime, thought maybe it was a good idea that we put one of those on there. Also, we've seen them on Mass DOT trucks. They have them up on the roofs. I'm not a big fan of putting holes in the roofs of new vehicles. So that's on here also. And the last, well, so there's 2 toolboxes also. We didn't think about putting toolboxes underneath the dump body on these because we've never had them on any of the other trucks. When you go down there to the upfitting store, they have trucks on display, customers' trucks that are already done. Thought, wow, that'd be a good idea. So that's why that's added on here now. The last piece on here, the temp sensor, it's a road surface sensor plus an air sensor. Mass DOT has them in all their vehicles where they can determine if the road needs more treatment or not. It could read 30 degrees air temperature, but the road temperature is actually 34 degrees. It's above freezing, so you're not putting material down. So it could be a cost savings in material use also. Again, we don't have that in any of the vehicles either. So we thought if it was allowed and approved on for the funding, it would be a good truck to try some of these extra new things on. The original allotted money was $125,000 for the truck package, and we had a not to exceed $110,000 after the bid price came back. So there is funds available out of this line item.
Questions, comments?
I'm all in favor of safety, and I can speak to the additional lights, both for illumination of your area and for visibility. I think side markers have been long overdue. Too bad somebody hadn't thought of that sooner.
So these aren't just side amber markers that
Right.
flash either. They actually turn into a spotlight also. If you're in the spot to be out trimming trees, whatever, at nighttime during a storm, it actually illuminates. It's a clear light all the way around the truck.
Oh, that's the dual color, it's a
Yeah.
switchable option.
I mean, even with this change order, we're still under what was originally appropriated. And I appreciate you taking ownership of the difference in the blades.
Oh, yeah, no, it's all
but
me.
I would rather fix that now than spend that amount you just mentioned over and over again.
I have no concerns with it.
It's always good to stay in the know, not just to get upsold, but it's probably worth next time maybe going out and checking out what they have for new stuff before we
Oh,
spec
absolutely.
it. I'm
Again,
just
just
thinking
something
'cause
new for us, yes.
It's the same with all of the groups, you know, when you're getting vehicles and the safety aspects keep changing every year,
Yep.
the lighting, the options, the things that other creative people think of that are helpful, right? And practical, so just a thought from what you said
Absolutely.
for all the groups as we're looking at new vehicles and, you know, next generation stuff.
Yep.
That's good.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
Motion to approve the purchase change order for the Ford F-550 plow truck to Colonial Ford of Marlboro, Mass. in the amount of $8,882.50 and authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
Well, second.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Review of the professional engineering services proposal for the cemetery feasibility study.
Oh, that's why there's 2 seats up here. Where'd she go?
She ran.
That's why she ran. Okay, we'll come right back to that. Review of the Maple Avenue and Bridge Street survey for public layout. So, it's a big question, I guess, if you will, and I'm not expecting us to dive into it in detail tonight. I just want to make sure that the question was out there, and directionally, where do we want to go? If where we want to go is to explore this further on the public road layout and what that would mean, then we'll schedule it on a future meeting with more time to do it, to dive into it. The I just can't get past the first sentence when we say ancient way.
Yeah.
Anyway, every time I read ancient way in quotes. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Quickly.
So in your packet, you have a brief memo and a written description of both Bridge Street and Maple Avenue. We assume Bridge Street would be the more challenging layout to describe, as it was laid out in the 1800s, as it's been called an ancient way. The surveyor that we hired to conduct the work has verified all the meets and bounds. It's 3 rods wide, or 49.5 feet, and has proposed monumenting both sides of the layout so that it's clear going forward, and has used the deeds of all the abutting property owners to verify those locations. So they've already been staked with orange flags so that both residents and the town had a chance to walk it, and we'll do it again with the residents if you choose to move forward. But we think that one's in good shape to bring forward to a future town meeting and ask the voters to properly adopt it. Maple Avenue we assumed would be the more straightforward one. That one is 2 rods wide, 33 feet. And it's a pretty rectangular layout. What came to light throughout this process is that the layout is shorter than I think most people would assume. There's a part towards the end of the layout where it sort of deviates a little bit to the right and then terminates at the salt shed by the old landfill. Turns out that it does that because we own 16.5 feet for our driveway to that property that we own, and an abutting parcel has 16.5 feet. And that runs parallel to our property line. The concern that we wanted to make sure that you were aware of, and we've sent correspondence to 2 property owners to make them aware of, is that that potentially means there's not legal frontage for at least 2 properties for buildable lots. One is occupied with a home on it already, and there's another parcel that currently does not have a home on it, but it is approximately 2 acres. So my belief is that that property owner has plans to one day construct a home on that property. So we wanted to make sure that the select board was aware of that concern, the property owners were aware of the concern, and to discuss what options you may, if you choose to explore, to rectify the situation.
And so, complex conversation, more of, do we want to, dive into that at a future meeting and look more at what it would take to potentially extend the public way some distance, potentially enough to create, I guess you will, the frontage required for the properties that don't have it based on this now known layout.
So, yes, I wouldn't mind having that conversation. At the end of the day, if it can't be resolved amicably between, I think there's 5 parties involved in the proposed changes. There's a sliver of land, and then there's a couple other slivers of parcels. If it's not a mutual agreement, then we can always just move forward with resurfacing, grinding and resurfacing as is. We don't really have to do anything different. It doesn't affect our parcel, it affects others. I know our due diligence has always wanted us to go through and make sure we rectify these issues, but I also don't want to do it with like takings that are not amicable, and if it becomes a imminent, it just doesn't make any sense to do it by force. So I think if we have a sit down at a future conversation with all parties involved, and if we can come to a mutual agreement that this is why we want to do it, it also cleans it up for any future resale value for any of those properties, because now that we know it's going to create problems when you transfer deeds in the future. We can't turn a blind eye to it now, and an attorney's not going to be able to turn around and say, I had no idea and I signed off on the deed with no frontage. It's just not going to happen. So I'm all for cleaning it up, but only if everybody else is involved and wants it to be done at the same time. By property owners, I mean.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay. So we'll set a future date. We'll let them know. I mean, most of them, we let them know we'd be starting the conversation tonight,
Yeah.
but probably not getting in depth. So we'll let them know we'd like to continue that discussion with them and understand what their interests or concerns are as well.
Okay.
Right at the end, we'll come back to when. I don't know yet what future meeting we'll sort that out.
Okay. No concerns with the Bridge Street layout. Maple's the question.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with Bridge Street.
No, I didn't either.
Okay.
Just Maple, yeah. Capital Finance, if you all want to come up, please, if you don't mind, we've got one other one just to clear out real quick, and then we'll dive into our joint meeting, but you're welcome to come up if you want. Back to review of the professional engineering services proposal for the cemetery feasibility study. Mariah, I think you're joining us on this one up here. So we had put out the proposal for engineering services for a new site, for siting a new cemetery. And we only received a single submission. There were 3 downloads, but only 1 submitted. Merrill Corp of Hanover, Mass. Proposal for professional engineering services in the amount of $44,600. We reviewed their references, et cetera, and everything came back good.
They were great. Everybody I talked to had glowing reviews. So it definitely increased my their proposal was wonderful, but talking to the reviews made me sure that they were a great fit. And the project references that I spoke to were clients who had dealt with them specifically on cemeteries, as well as other types of projects.
You're good? Questions, comments, concerns?
So we had appropriated 100, and their proposals for 44.6, and that includes all 3 locations that they were looking at, or?
It would look at 3 locations, and if none of those 3 locations would be satisfactory, it would provide us with a scope of what you would be looking for in a piece of property if the recommendation is to procure something different than what we currently own. So there's 2 different types of deliverables depending on what they find in the field.
If I followed, they find something that works, or they recommend what we do need based on not finding it.
Correct.
We get one or the other.
Correct.
I will say that in their proposal, I forget the exact language they included, but basically if they can immediately rule out a parcel or 2, that they would essentially like recycle that funding into doing further research on one or crafting a very detailed description of what we do need, which I thought was very nice of them, because I'm assuming they put that together after looking at GIS and could probably immediately pinpoint that there was something that wasn't going to work on one of those parcels.
Yeah. Yeah, I read, it's in the 3rd paragraph of their, I was reading that, I was scrolling through trying to figure out, it's not broken down with what that reallocation would consist of, but, the idea that if they don't have to spend time on two of them, they can spend more time on one and still have the deliverables, more deliverables for the same price if they're not spending time on three parcels. So I was happy with that as well.
Any other questions, concerns, or motion?
I have no
Just that-
concerns.
Our current cemetery capacity is being maxed.
Dwindling fast.
Dwindling, yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
There is 29 unsold lots as of today.
That's not a lot of lots.
Not a lot of lots.
Did I hear you say you were looking for a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll make the motion to engage Merrill Corporation of Hanover, Mass. For professional engineering services for the new cemetery feasibility study in the amount of $44,600.00, and to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome. Appreciate your patience. We'll call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order at 7:10 PM. Welcome. Other than the one additional document, everything in our packet is the same. There's no changes between the packets, right? Never mind. We're good.
They're the same.
Thank you. So continuing the FY financial review with the departments. We've got a variety of submissions and people here tonight, and then we also have some feedback from some of the questions from last time. So I might have missed it. In my review of them, did we get feedback from the town clerk after noting the potential for additional elections? I might have missed it in there. I was just starting back at that initial list that we had questions about from last meeting.
Stand by.
If anybody else saw it and I missed it.
Apparently I did miss one. Let me forward that to all of you right now, and I'll read it off. So he reiterated that for FY24, he believes his budget is sufficient,
Okay.
and he's also not expecting any major increases for FY25 or beyond at this point, with the possible exception of a software change if we are able to proceed with that. He then talked about the question that you asked about running a town election. So the cost for running a single election equates to $3,050.
Should we assume, I see the message you just forwarded, should we assume that he has that within the FY24 to do one? Or not?
According to him, he's saying his FY24 budget is sufficient.
Even with that extra election? Is a belief, I'm guessing? Okay,
That's
okay.
my understanding of what he's
Okay.
saying.
All right.
But if there was more than one special election, it sounds like
I see,
if we need to estimate that cost.
understood. how do you want to approach this? So we can go down through what we got back from each. We can talk a little bit about the closeout summary of last year and any questions about surpluses by group, or touch on those as we're going down through each budget discussion. If there's any preferences amongst the group.
I would say the people that are here in attendance, rather than make their night any longer, we could hear from them while we're here, and any of the closeout items to discuss, we can do after that.
Work? Okay. First one up, I believe, in the packet is education.
Which one did you say?
First one in the packet is education, is that right? I believe. 3C, is that right?
Sounds right.
Mackenzie, you want to come up? Yes, please.
Yeah,
That's all right.
Speaking up, even with the speaker, it's hard to get enough clarity.
Can do. Thank you.
So I think the only thing that was new in your packet was just a copy of the amended FY24 budget after town meeting. So there's a supporting document that wasn't in your packet on the 24th.
Right. And then we have the response that we had back from Caitlin last time
For the 24th.
in there.
correct.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. So I know we had asked everyone to take a look at it and see their budgets and see, what does that look like for 24? Are we good? Do we need more or less? What does that look like? And then beyond as well. I know you had scheduled a meeting to discuss with the school committee before this. Appreciate that. Anything just kind of opening, maybe just is any increases, decreases, thoughts about the next fiscal years? How does the school committee feel about that budget?
So we're talking about the FY24 budget right now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So we went through the budget. What primarily we focused on was any lines that had not been spent down from fiscal year 23 and kind of where we're at with those. Do we feel like those are appropriately funded for FY24? Do we need to shift any money? There was rationale given for pretty much every budget line. There was two lines actually in our budget that we are getting more information on. Do you have this budget with those?
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
So specifically lines 102 and 103, those are lines that hadn't been used for the last few years. And so the question was, do we really need those? First of all, we asked really kind of what came out of those, and there wasn't a lot of information about those lines, and then whether we still felt we needed those to fund those lines. And so Caitlin was going to be looking in on that and getting back to us. And so we're still waiting for that answer. That's, $21,500 that we feel might possibly be used somewhere else. We are going to need to employ an ELL teacher at a higher FTE than we initially anticipated. But I anticipate being able to find that within our current budget, so we won't, we may end up using lines 102 and 103. Things like that, so shifting around. But we did not feel like we needed any more to this budget, and I think there's some lines that we're certainly going to be looking at carefully this year as to whether we spend them the way that they've been allocated, and whether we need to change that for FY '25. Does that answer the question you asked?
It's a great opener. Thank you. I just had a question. As I'm looking at the detail here, it looks like we don't have 23 actuals yet. Is that right? Or is it just not in our detail?
Caitlin gave, are you talking about like the closeout?
Like the line by line, like, through 100 and something, I see, at least on the one we have 22 budget and actual, we have 23 budget and 24 requested, but we don't have 23 actual.
Yeah, I
And
don't.
I know it's been about a month, but I don't know if we have it yet.
I don't have it. I
Okay.
don't have it. I know Caitlin did send over, which I actually am realizing I don't have in front of me, what the final expenditure report was as of the end of the month, July 31st. So we do have it in that form, but we don't have it here in a nice,
Concise.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And certainly we can get that.
And then I think looking at our closeout summary overall, if I get back to that memo, Brian, we had in group 3 education, which is all education, we had 190,000 and change left over.
That's elementary and secondary
Right,
together.
it's all, yep. Do we know where the majority of that was? Or the breakdown?
Almost an even split. It was approximately 85,000 in elementary, and it was 95,000 in secondary.
So, to the budget, we might not have the detail, but about 85 of miscellaneous, of various left over.
Yep.
Okay. Questions, comments?
More of a comment. So I wasn't able to get to the last school committee meeting. I apologize. I wanted to be there. Thank you for your comments, because there was some misinformation about where the premise of you discussing your budget came from. So I appreciate the clarification on a number of occasions to keep that narrative correct. Looking at the budget, looking at the overall increase of approximately $620,000 from FY '23 to '24. That's before grants that are applied. We're increasing with sped tuition, sped transportation. We had other costs that were incurred. It appears there would be a surplus, but I also think it would be very difficult, and I did go back and watch the meeting, very difficult at this point to rapid fire figure out exactly what line item and the allocation of money, of where it's over or under. My suggestion is, I think you've already alluded to this in a number of occasions, looking at FY '24 as like this is the starting point of where we're going to really hone in on following our budget to, thank you, I took it off earlier, to make sure that we're finding out where the money is actually needed and where it's spent. And then for FY '25, '26, '27, we are looking at a long-range plan of if we need to do an override collectively for the town and the school has a large portion of that budget, how does that play in? And are there funds in '25 and '26 that maybe we found out after the completion of '24 that were over appropriated? Or not. We might find out that with all the needs and that things changing, that it was closer than we realized. And, so I don't know. I really would, as much as I would like to look at this and say, I think there's going to be a surplus, I don't have that crystal ball. But I would really, I'm encouraged by hearing you say in previous meetings, school committee meetings, town floor, that we're keeping a close eye on the budget going forward to make sure that if there are lines that are unused, if there are pockets of money that are unnecessary in there, let's reallocate them somewhere else. And I think if we're relying on that level of scrutiny for FY '25 and beyond, when we're looking in the long range, that's very helpful. I don't know if it's going to be that helpful for the immediate push over the next 60 days or so to figure out if we need an override to augment the '24 budget for the rest of the town. So I'm not looking at those funds for anything like that, but I think going forward in '25 and beyond, we'll have a better basis of knowledge of where do we need to be. Because there was a lot of extra things that came about in FY '23 that some are staying into '24, some are not. And we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was several factors that made it a little bit more difficult to really have a good sense of some of these lines. And so exactly my hope is that as we move through this year, we'll be getting the monthly updates, and we'll be really able to track where the money is going and how it's allocated. And some of that also has to do with just generally the world we're in right now as far as staffing. Like, for instance, one of the points that we spent a little bit of time discussing was substitutes, right? So we all know that there are going to be people that are going to be out, and we need to have substitutes to cover those people. But the question is, are there substitutes out in the world that want to come and work at Erving Elementary? So we could budget an infinite amount of money, but if we don't actually have the people that want to come in and do that job, then, that money might not be spent. We all agree it's needed and it's needs to be in there, but to what level, it's a little hard to tell, because we don't know if we're going to have sufficient sub pool to draw from. And same with some of the positions we have open. We have a couple of para positions open. Are we going to be able to find the people that want to, do those jobs? So it is a little bit difficult, but I do intend to keep a close watch on it and reallocate from within before coming back.
And I think if nothing else, even if it isn't reallocated to other parts or other departments in '25 and beyond, even if it stays within, if it's noted that the current budget had a capacity for growth, there was an excess there,
Yeah.
then looking at the projection for FY '25, '26, '27, your ask of the town for an increase might be minimized because the capacity's there.
Yep.
It's already been allocated, so maybe instead of we've been seeing 5, 6, 7, 8% asked annually, maybe it's a 2%, a 1%, because the funds are there. It was, with this influx of funds.
Yep.
So we'll see how it plays out over the next year. Well, not quite a year. Yeah, I said that, and then I realized, annual town meeting is actually not that far away.
Right. Well, but budget season is not that far away.
No, it's not. Budget season is only a couple of months away.
Yeah, it feels like it right outside right now.
Yeah.
Thought we just got done with that.
I know. I had to pull it back out a long sleeve shirt. I'm like, what's this? I'm in
Feels
pants
like
again.
fall.
Mackenzie, can you update us, where are we with the vehicles, potentially, instead of using an outside company? And also the heating and cooling grant?
I don't have any information on the heating and cooling grant. The van the van purchasing, we are working as quickly as we can. Brian's run into a little bit of an issue getting a contractor to supply us with a van, but we do have a consultant waiting in the wings to help us through that process whenever it is we can get that vehicle. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern, just waiting for the contractor to come back with a van, with a vehicle. As soon as we can procure one, we're ready to go with the rest of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it possible to get an update on where the status of the heating and cooling? I know that system is mentioned at every school committee meeting. Would technically be a capital project, and it's something that, until we heard it being talked about at a meeting, the capital committee had no idea that was going on.
Okay, yep.
So we have gotten a request form for it, but I do know, if I remember correctly, I think it was around a $100,000 grant, and that was for a study of the system and hopefully some funding left over to make some repairs. So we can just get an update as to where that stands, and being kept in the loop would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I haven't gotten an update lately, so I will definitely look, ask about that. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the
Sure.
van? Would that be taken out of line 74, sped transportation, the 181,000?
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the purchase of the van was coming from the town side, right? I say, not.
We've had a lot of
not confidently.
conversations, so maybe it was at some point. We were in support of figuring it out, absolutely, how to fund the assets. If we had a plan for more a cost savings in the operational cost, if we were able to get assets. At this point, given where we were after annual town meeting and special town meeting and all of that, I don't know that we have a source like right here ready, but I think we're all open to understanding that and then weighing the payback, right? If we're going to invest in the asset, can we do it out of that line based on what we may need for staffing and oversight and all those pieces? I don't pretend to know,
Right.
but was that so? I guess to answer your question, ish, we don't necessarily have it, but we may have. We may be able to find it, or that may be part of what we need to put on the proposal.
Right.
I mean, it would make sense if the money was, so we still have a contract right now because we don't have the van, so we still have a outside vendor providing that service. Assuming we are, close enough in the year that we can get this van up and running and that line item is still there, then certainly that would make sense to use that.
That is exactly what it's for. Is to provide the transportation for the students. And so however that gets spent would be fine.
I mean, that would be my,
Yeah.
again, right now it's allocated because that's the cost of this outside vendor to provide the service. But we have a clause in our contract with that outside service that with a 30-day notice, we can get out of that contract. So as soon as we are up and running with our own transportation, 30 days later, we can get out of that
Very
contract.
nice.
Hopefully, it's not, June that we're doing that, it's December. I'd love if we could get it done by December.
Yeah. So just a little clarity on that line. That is not we keep talking about a couple of students that are going, that line item is all encompassing. There are more than just two that there's outside transportation
Yes,
services
that
for.
is.
So it's not in totality where this one van that we would purchase may satisfy a couple of students. It would not satisfy all students. So there would still need to be a pool of money in that line item to satisfy the contract that would still have to stay. So it's,
Yes, although it would be significantly less.
it'd be significantly less, but it's not, you couldn't zero it out.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you clarify, if you know more, what are we waiting on, a van? Or some quotes for a van? I didn't quite,
So we're using the same contract that we used to buy the plow trucks,
okay.
but there's 12 categories of,
Okay.
of different types of vehicles. There are only 3 vendors that provide 70
7D.
compliant vehicles. So
Okay.
the pool is
Waiting to
much
get-
smaller, and getting a response from these vendors has proven much more challenging. But when you consider the fact that for highway, we send it out to several and we only get one response, that's the struggle that we're encountering. We've reached out to OSD, who oversees these contracts, for assistance with that, and they've offered us some help. And to Mackenzie's point, we now have a consultant through her work with identifying somebody who's done this before for other school districts who can help us walk through this process so that everything we're doing is code compliant.
Got it, and how to do it.
As soon as we get a
Manage it,
vendor
get
that
it.
comes back
Right,
and
get it,
says,
and
I
actually
have
get
a product.
quote, at least have
Yeah.
a quote for a
Right.
product that's compliant.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
move on to the next phases of framing this out.
I mean, we're ready to go. We just need the physical, van.
Right. Hold on, we'll get to questions after, if there's anything else from the group first. Did that answer the questions on transport?
Yes.
Oh, and actually, I just wanted to say, actually, the line item will, for that transportation will go down slightly because there was the new contract that we negotiated is a little bit less. So there will be some savings in that line overall.
Question?
I just wanted a little clarity. The special education transportation is broken out into the secondary and elementary level. So the 186 that Linda was talking about is just for the elementary level, and we have additional funding for the secondary for sped transportation? Okay.
Yes.
Just thinking perhaps if that is not overspent or there's funding in there, we could transfer it and help pay for the thing overall.
Just for clarity, because I know that wasn't on the mic, Jackie was asking if the 176, or the 181, 400, sorry, was just primary, or if it was all special ed transportation. It's just for Erving Elementary. Other questions on the school budget?
Can I just say?
Please.
Briefly, I watched part of the school committee meeting, and just in the interest of just stating it, and people can disagree if they want, we all ought to be working on this as a team. Finance committee, select board, and the parents. Working together so that we're sure the kids get the education they need, they're adequately funded. We also, I believe, should support the school committee and every department looking at their budget as they go along, so that at the end of the year, they can say, gee, we really don't need this money to end up with good fire protection or good police protection or good education for our kids, because more money just doesn't instantly translate into better firefighting or better policing or better schooling or better education. So hopefully, the parents, who are also taxpayers, put their kids first, as they should, but also put on their taxpayer hat. And we ought to encourage all departments, school committee included, because it's a big chunk of our budget, to look at this as a team. It's not ever should be we against them, us against they, any of that stuff. We're kind of all in this together. We all want good education for the kids, and we all want good value for our money, I think. Thank you.
Agreed. I appreciate the school committee pulling together that meeting quickly and having, being able to come tonight. We were open to the 21st as well, but being ready to come back and talk about it and having done the review. I think that's what we asked of all departments, and to do this together, to your point, and look at what does that mean now, what does that mean in future years, as best we can tell, up, down, or otherwise. It really wasn't in any specific direction, but just to make sure we are providing the services, given the budget season we went through, right? Now, with what is sustainable and what brings a level of service. So I appreciate your efforts on that. I think for now, future years, I think we touched on it a little bit, but it's, best we know, except maybe the capital and transportation changes that are significant, would hope to be able to operate within the budget with a normal annual increase that we can fit within our normal levy limit, I guess. Is that a fair statement? Best on what we know today.
Yeah, I think what we know is that we will most likely need to fund a position that is currently being funded out of grants. Other than that, I don't know that we know of any other issues that aren't already addressed in our budget. And again, if we can get transportation under control, that might be enough to absorb that, as well as other lines if we, move things around. That's my hope. But leaving the door open that there's the possibility that we would need to fund that position if we choose to keep it. And of course, obviously barring any special education costs that are always unknown, or, might be unknown.
When you look into the, or try to get a status update on the heating, the HVAC system, based on what that is meant to do, if you have any idea at that point on a timeline on if it's a recommended replacement, when there might be an probable cost or any of that, right? I think that could be significant, obviously, and then factoring that into what is our capacity in coming fiscal years, and to be able to, hopefully with lots of grant assistance, do that work
Yep.
would be great. I know that's not going to be an answer we're going to have today, but when might we?
Right. I'll ask for it, and hopefully we'll have it by the next school committee meeting, which is on the 22nd. So that would be my hope.
Okay.
Should be long enough of an amount of time.
If they can kind of give us an idea just for long-term planning of any capital projects. I know this is probably pretty out of date, but just pulling up our 25-year plan for FY '25, and I believe it was Principal Trail who submitted this, so it's very out of date, and at that time, it was about $108,000 worth of capital for FY '25. Things on here are a John Deere tractor, or a tornado extractor. These are just some of the requests that were put in. So these are things we've always held as a placeholder. So I would just ask, I can shoot this over to you if you don't have it.
Yep.
Just to get an idea of what now with, I know the principal situation is in flux, but with a new school committee and I'm assuming the superintendent, and maybe just kind of getting together and reviewing and looking at it and saying, these are things we don't need, or they might have even been replaced. And just if kind of a ballpark of what the school committee might be considering for capital projects
Yep.
coming up, that would be great.
Sure. I'm going to be creating the agenda for our August 22nd meeting, so we can put on the capital planning. If you want to send that to me, I'll make sure that Caitlin and Jen Colkeen have a copy of it, and so we can discuss it.
Okay.
We may have already, but should we send over all of the open capital articles that have funding that have not been closed out yet too? Is that something you've all looked at recently?
I know it would be helpful to have it again, because I know of
Okay.
some things, but I would want to make sure that we have
True it all
all of
up?
it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can send that over.
great. Any other budget questions? The 21st, we're going to have a joint meeting, correct? To
Yep.
do appoint an interested citizen to the open seat,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have a time already planned for that?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't.
Do you
You
have
two
a
get to
ti-
figure that out.
Yeah, I know. While we're here, we're two minutes.
6:45?
You want like 6:45, like 6:35?
I don't. I honestly, I don't have a
6:55?
preference. So whatever.
Okay, 6:35? We'll just get it
Do
away,
it
get
early
it
on.
out of the way right away. Does that work?
6:35.
Yeah.
What an odd time.
I know. That's why I repeated it. I want to make sure I
6:30
heard it
or after we
right.
start?
Not 6:36. Nope. All right. Sure. That sounds good.
Does that work? Okay, great.
The deadline for letters of interest are August 15th. So
Okay.
folks
So we're
are
still
considering
taking-
putting in a letter.
That's the only agenda item we're going to have in that joint meeting, right?
Yeah, correct.
So it shouldn't
As far as I
be
know,
more than
it
a few
should be
minutes.
a couple
Okay.
minutes. We're gonna put it right at the beginning, we'll get it out of the way and
Should be done by
let you all
6:37.
go. Yeah. Maybe even 6:36.
You need to hold them to that now.
Jeez. I wouldn't put money on it. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Nope,
Mackenzie.
good. All right.
All good. Okay. Just going down the list, I think the next department head here tonight is Chief Wonka. Come on up, sir. I didn't know if you could hear me back there with that. If Finance and Capital will oblige, before we let you go, we'll just touch on that exhaust capture system.
Okay.
So then your business
I'd
is wrapped
appreciate
up.
that. Thank you.
So we have your memo here. Do you want to just, do you want to have him just touch on the highlights of it, and then we'll go do Q&A from there?
Okay, so we took a deep dive into the budget over the last 6 years, and saw where we had overtures across the board, so kind of cut those back. Some of it's still a little unknown, but we would like, not for the FY '24, but moving forward in FY '25, we'd like to add one more additional person into that, into the mix in there that's covered in that memo. So we gave up some money on some line items to put them more truly in line with where we're, what the spending is on them, to control that added expense to it.
Has it been 6 years since we've been with full-time?
2017.
Doesn't feel like it's been that long.
No, it hasn't. It doesn't feel that long at all. So with the proposed, it's a projected budget I did, some of those numbers are still in flux. The one that we don't really know and we don't have any control over is the ambulance service budget line item. That's set by the ambulance services that we use. Northfield is currently going through a Collins Institute project to see where, how to make that a feasible service for the long-term goal, which we would love to see. So I would expect a larger price tag coming out of that one, which I would wholly support that. And the orange ambulance service usually increases yearly too.
Chief, for those that don't have your memo in front of them, can you talk a little bit more about the desire for the fourth member, specifically some of the things you mentioned in the memo were like the OSHA requirement of 2 in, 2 out, and the overlapping calls. So it was the justification piece, because I think without having some of that background knowledge, just hearing that you want to add another staff member,
Okay.
people might have some questions about why.
Sure. So when we started this project back in 2017 is when we went live. The governor we weren't an OSHA state at the time. Since then, the governor signed us into, we became an OSHA state. OSHA's rule for firefighting is 2 in, 2 out. And currently with 3 people, we don't meet that expectation. So to meet the OSHA rules and to keep it safe for firefighters, there's a 2 in, 2 out rule. So two outside, 2 inside. Command staff can fit that role for the 2 out in case there's an emergency. Having 4 people on staff most of the time would benefit us. We'd be able to effectively start a good fire attack while we're not waiting for mutual aid to arrive on scene, and also if we needed to effect a rescue, we could quickly and capably do that. We've had a couple of fires in town. Obviously, we're gonna do the best we can. Most of the time, with it, when you don't have the backup crew standing there when you're sending guys through that front door into a burning building, safety's first. So, we're waiting for our mutual aid partners to arrive. Nearest mutual aid partners would be Turner's Falls, Greenfield, Orange. Takes them a couple minutes to get there.
Have you replaced the empty slot you have right now for?
We did. We just filled it.
Okay.
Who left?
Have we,
Brandon went to Turner's Falls.
at some point soon, once everything's in order and paperwork and everything, we should make an announcement?
Okay, correct.
I know that's just being done now. It's
Yes.
correct. It's
Like today.
yeah,
I actually have it.
it's filled.
I have it today.
It's,
So.
it's filled-ish.
It's still, yeah,
It was an offer.
we're in the.
it's in process, yes.
It's almost filled.
So, just a follow-up question. You had said you've included the proposed budget submission for '25 with the additional staff member.
Correct.
We're talking about looking at operational needs and are they being met, and should we augment '24? My question to you is, if that were to become part of our conversation and not just an 8% increase from '24 to '25, but if it could be worked in to augment '24, would you be able to be would you have the capacity to fill that void, should you have the funding to do so?
With the current past budget?
Well, with an augmentation of, so what I'm saying is, we're looking at this discussion is about a discussion of whether or not we're going to be having a 2.5 override to add funds to FY '24 and future years to build up our levy limit. So if this were part of that conversation, is there a dollar amount that we could look at that would make that happen, that 8%? If that were added to FY '24, would you have the capacity to hire that fourth person this fiscal year? If it became part of our conversation in the fall?
Wholeheartedly, if it became, I'd have to get some solid numbers for this year, but yeah, I think we could fit that in.
I mean, clearly you wouldn't be looking at a full year.
Right.
So you'd be looking at a half a year.
Yeah.
By the time we ever got around to it, but, okay. If you could just put together some numbers of what, say, like September and beyond, if you were to fill it in that time frame.
Okay.
What that would look like?
Yeah.
I threw out September just because it's next month. I don't know when we're going to, it's optimistic.
It's a month.
It's a month.
I had a couple of questions. One is, you said we are now an OSHA compliant state for firefighting. And with the 2 in, 2 out that you explained, does that mean we are now not in compliance, or do
Correct.
we have it? Are there
Well,
any?
so we are non-compliance for firefighting if we're gonna make the door right away. If we showed up to a structure fire and we were gonna send guys in there, we wouldn't be compliant with the duty staff that we have today.
Unless the call force or
Unless the
mutual
call
aid
force
was on
member was
scene,
there.
right? Or until.
Or until mutual aid arrives.
So we're not under any threat of being in violation of OSHA. As long as you operate within certain guidelines, we're not going to see fines or anything
Well,
else.
Yeah, I was going to say, conversely, the only way you do that is by holding off services.
Yes.
Whether it's a
Right.
minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but that time matters. When they're standing there saying, we can't enter until a fourth person shows up, whether that's from our own call staff or a mutual aid responder.
I mean, there's definitely other techniques you can fight an exterior fire,
Right.
It
Sure.
can
Can't
be
enter the
strictly a
dwelling.
defensive fire.
Right, no, and I understand
Yeah.
the sense of urgency when 2 seconds is too long. I get
You know,
that.
yeah.
That's not where I just wanted to make sure by not having that additional staff that we weren't potentially opening ourselves up to any type of fines or liability as far as OSHA. But I understand, yes, you might have to fight a fire shorthanded until assets arrive. My other question on the staffing, and this goes back a little bit to 2017, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but there was discussion at the time, the justification for a full-time force involved staffing both Erving Center and Erving Side. Should, say, we had that October storm and the town was cut in half, would be able to man both stations and serve both sides of town. Would any consideration be put into that, or is that?
So the duty staff floats in between the two stations now, and it never fails. Whichever side of town we're staged at that day, the call's on the opposite side of town anyway, so.
Damned if you do and damned
Yeah.
if you don't. Okay.
I mean, when you go run radar on the other side of town, you get called to this side of town for something. It's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And back then, our call volume, I think when we started this, our call volume was running just a little under 200 a year. We're on tap this year to be over 400 calls for the year. They're just increasing.
Chief,
Count-
can I ask the nature of the calls? Are they primarily medical?
Yeah, so 60 to 65% of the calls are medical calls. That seems to be the national average all the way across the boards. I mean, we've done a great job in fire prevention and with code enforcement and all that stuff of, keeping structure fires down, which is a good thing. Also a bad thing because we're working ourselves out of a job, but the medical calls are increasing. They seem to be increasing. The dual calls that I touched on in that medical, so dual calls are calls that we're out at a call and another one comes in, have been increasing too. I think it was, I don't have the memo right.
You,
in front of me.
the overlapping?
Yeah, the
Like
overlapping
17% or 18%, something like that. Yeah.
Call volume, when you're referencing that as a fiscal year or calendar year?
Calendar year.
Calendar year. Do-
And how come they haven't gone up at all? And what,
So when we started back in 2000, well, prior to me being chief, we had a couple of large fires in town where we had to come back and ask the finance committee for reserve fund transfers. So the town was very graciously way overfunded the wage line with the anticipation that if we didn't use it, we would turn it in. So we historically have done that. And then each year, to keep the budget under control, we whittle away a little bit each and every time. We're getting to the point now where we're at that limit where it's going to start increasing again, I think, as we go along, but we've done a great job of bringing it down.
and actually to follow up on Jim's question in regard to the OSHA, by having 3 people, that doesn't leave you at a point where you're not eligible for some grants or anything as well?
So we do get grants.
Right.
But the firefighter for assistant grants are difficult for the town of Erving because we have such a large savings account. That's usually the first thing that gets kicked out, when they put it through the computer and it gets kicked out because there's not necessarily a financial need for us, compared to some of the other communities. It's a double-edged sword, that savings account of ours.
Same with that EQV
I wouldn't,
calculation.
I wouldn't recommend that either, but.
Just real quick, one question. We had about 80,000, it looks like, surplus in public safety.
Correct.
Approximately how much was fire, do you know? Or do you know offhand, Chief?
On the wrong screen.
I don't know, I haven't seen the 100% closeout numbers yet.
It's top secret, we just got it today.
While you all talk, I will pull that up for you.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
This may be the first that many people have heard of the two-in, two-out discussion and OSHA and all that, and Massachusetts becoming an OSHA state for that project. Certainly want firefighters to be safe, but but in addition, a question comes up. If I'm understanding this right, house is on fire, and you need 2 people outside of the fire, and before you can send somebody into the fire, you have 2 people in the fire. You don't just send somebody alone. Is that right? Is that the general understanding?
That's how the rule reads.
Okay, so do we have call fighters that show up?
We do.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, because, I would encourage that we keep that for certain, but also move forward with this as quickly as we can, so we never, ever encounter a situation where we've got 2, 3 firefighters standing outside, and people are in the building and say, can't go in because OSHA won't let me. So I'm just encouraged we find some funding for that, make it happen. I think anybody who's in the building waiting for the firefighters to come in would also encourage that.
Not to sound like a downer to that, but I just want to ask this to be transparent. That still doesn't mean that during the staffed hours, 365 days a year, or the staffed days out of the 365, you'll actually have 4 people, because there's still PTO and there's still,
That's
there's
correct.
sick time, and
Correct.
there's all that. So
There's training
even that
time.
is not going to be all the day
All the time.
shifts all the time.
It's a step
It's
closer.
much closer.
Yeah.
More than 50% better, I'm sure.
Yes.
than now, but just to temper a little that it's not, doesn't flip the switch and make it 100%.
No, in all reality, you'd end up having to get the staff up to, just to cover the day shift as they do now, probably 6, to allow for a couple of people to be off at any given time. If what you're looking for is 100% 365 coverage, it's not just
not even 52 weeks, 5 days a week, I should
Yeah,
say. It's
true.
more accurate.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
I hear you.
Just to make sure that's clear, it doesn't take away from the added value and benefit from
Correct.
from 4.
No, but it allows us to meet that standard much more than it would,
Today.
than it does now. I think, I mean, my numbers are just rough. I'm gonna say right around 60 is what we turned in the FY '20 budget, but
Do you want those numbers?
Yeah, do you have it? Yeah. Okay.
I'd be curious to see where I'm at.
I'm just going to aggregate by grouping. So, fire department salary and wages, there was a balance of $7,468.
Could you speak just a little louder, Brian?
Of course, anything for you.
Getting old.
For wages, it was a genuine offer. For wages in the fire department, there was a balance of $7,468. For ordinary maintenance, a balance of $4,923. I'm going to not include the balances in special articles. For ambulance services, there's a remaining balance of $10,596. And in EMS licensure and services, we have a balance of $3,591.
That's it? So that's about 25?
I'm sorry. I was looking at this year's. I was looking at the wrong one, so I got about
This year?
25. Yeah.
You got a lot more to give us back already this year. Still left. Okay, so about 25. Get it. Thank you. I'd bring it up just to A, touch on it because we have it in our data, and B, just, thinking, not that every budget can we look at our financial policy of 5%, budgeting at 5% over as realistic, depending on the scale of the budget.
Right.
Smaller it is, the less realistic that is enough cushion. But on 500, that's pretty much right there. Or so.
Pretty good.
5%. Huh?
So I did good, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I mean, that's, right, Brian, as you've mentioned
Good
several
summary,
times,
yes.
that's the
We're right in the
expectation
range of
is
where we expect to
5%,
be.
you know.
Right. 20 to 25 is probably where that would be. So. And I think it's just to, for me at least, it's just, is there anything glaringly, like, why are we so far off anywhere? And I don't see that here.
No, and part of this, actually, we doubled back through, from 2019 forward on those overtures. Those first couple of years were extremely hard to judge, because there was a whole bunch of unknowns for us. But as we get more years under our feet, it's a little easier for us to get it under control. And then COVID obviously threw us a huge looper in there.
It'd be like roughly $50,000 for a fourth person according to your
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah, I feel like if we budgeted for 50,000 with the cutbacks, that keeps the budget under the 8%, right?
Roughly, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking what you're showing here is just about 40 for a whole year, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking a partial, it might be 25, 30, depending on when.
Oh, if you're talking 24, yeah, I think you
Yeah,
were
I guess
thinking
I'm-
25.
Are you talking
Yeah, I was
25?
saying.
Yeah, I was looking
okay.
at 25.
I'm sorry.
Difference is
I'm
about
sorry.
50 grand.
I got you.
But yeah, I think if you're looking for a number, for September 30, 25 to 30 would be right around that ballpark. For this year.
Salary from September to the end of June?
End of September, so you already minus 3 months.
For 25,000 for
So it'd be like
9
40
months?
or 37.5 if you were to hire someone on October 1 possibly.
Doesn't seem like enough to me.
Well,
so
it'd just
we're
be
looking-
from
If you look at
October
his
1.
detail, go ahead, it's your detail, but I know what
So
you're saying.
we're looking at, we have an employee that's left after 6 years, so the wage line would go, down on that. The new hire would go down on that, the overtime. We've saved some money on the overtime already, so.
But you'd have uniforms and,
Yeah, we
I would
put that into the
imagine
expense lines.
things like-
It's
okay.
kind of built in.
oh, good.
But I think in his proposed 25 example here, you've also reduced your non-salary expenses by 10 or so and shifted that up to the salary.
Correct.
So the 25, 30 plus
yeah.
another 8 to 10 that he's already got in other lines that could shift around. Is that fair to say?
Makes sense.
Because I get what you're saying. It doesn't sound like enough to pay somebody for 9 months in that role.
Correct.
Yeah.
It would be shifting around from other places.
Yeah, there's
It'd be
other
taking
spots
the
that
net
help.
savings from the current staff member that's coming in at a lower rate from the older staff member that just left.
Other questions?
No, I just want to say thank you. So the idea of looking at the budget and doing the internal shifting from line item to line item, I don't need it here. We are going to repurpose that money here so that I don't have to ask for a blanket increase to the budget because I know I have it. It's just not in the right line item. That's outstanding and appreciated.
I appreciate you noticing that.
We touched a little on capital in the last one. I don't know if there's any specific capital questions we have for you, except the fire truck that's always there. It
Yeah.
always comes up.
You're gonna need to send me that list, too, so
Yeah.
I can massage it a bit.
Well, let's see, for 2025, all you have is a gear hose and a dryer for 13,000. But yeah, we kicked your fire truck to 2023.
From what?
He originally put in for the fire truck, quite a few seasons ago.
Okay.
And we have, that's for I have that down as it would be replacing a 1989 Pierce pumper. And we have a cost of about $700,000. So that was FY23. And then we also had an FY21 for a 96 International.
It's the rescue
Font
truck.
is way too small.
That would be the rescue truck, the heavy rescue.
Okay, for 250.
And these are prior on the capital plan that we just keep kicking the can on, so what's the reality of
Yep.
them, right? I
So,
think we
yeah,
need to revisit.
the
You don't need to
unfortunate-
answer, well, you can answer tonight if you know, but I don't think we're necessarily
I mean,
expecting.
the unfortunate part behind that is when we did that 25-year plan, we used the NFPA guidelines, which said every 20 years you have to replace a fire truck, and that's just, it's not financially feasible for smaller towns like this, and I don't think it's necessarily good. None of our equipment is in risk of breaking down, as it goes out the door. There's not that fear factor it's going to come back on a tow from Timmy Tierney, from up Rose Ledge. The trucks are phenomenally kept. They're still up and running. They just don't have all the safety equipment that the newer truck would offer, as far as that goes, but they also don't have all of the emission stuff that goes wrong with the new trucks that we're seeing. The newest truck we have probably spends the most time up there getting the check engine light reset because of all of the electronics in it that set the check engine lights off for no reason at all.
So the reality of the 1989 means it could be here for a little bit longer if it's maintained properly.
Correct. The unfortunate part is the NFPA guidelines are written for the entire country, and if New York City's rolling a truck more than 20 years, then, obviously that thing's got some war years on it. Ours, not
so much,
necessarily.
yeah.
It's still a great truck, it still runs, it still gets out the door, it still does everything it's supposed to do.
So I'm about to kick that can down the road by
That's
about
right.
10 years.
Yeah, that
We're gonna
$1
punt
million,
a bit
that
further.
$1 million in 10 years will be $2 million, but hey.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. So I did get a price with the chief show for the new Volterra, which is a hybrid truck, that's about $1 million plus.
Instead of the
A
700.
green fire truck.
Yeah, a green fire truck costs you
But-
more.
Oh,
We
boy.
get 35 more years out of it, maybe. Since you brought it up now, it got me curious. If we're kicking the can on new equipment because the equipment's okay, what about the safety changes, and are there things that we can implement as upgrades to our existing fleet to help?
So the only other thing I've ever
that
seen them,
might,
I've
be
seen
a
them do cab
cheaper-
off restorations where they put some of the safety features in there, but you're still talking $300,000-$400,000, and you're still putting it on a 1989 frame.
Okay.
I guess a lot's going to tell us with any of the legislation that comes out on the federal side of the House with, the climate change stuff, on what they're going to mandate for any of those changes.
Those don't sound like economical upgrades for
No,
for the return on an old truck then.
nope.
I mean, I don't think so. The 89 doesn't have airbags like the newer trucks. It has seat belts. It has everything else it has to have, so.
Other questions for fire?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So we're going to talk about something else, or?
Yes, we are. Thank you for reminding me. Real quick, if you all don't mind, we're gonna review the fire department exhaust capture system invitation for bid draft. So we've developed the IFB for this. Invitation for bid, we have 150,000 allocated for the project.
Correct.
And this is for both fire stations, for the exhaust capture systems.
Correct.
Yes, and I think the bid was for 3 complete systems only because Station 2 here on Moore Street has 2 garages upstairs and downstairs. We would need 2 separate systems. But I think we called those out specifically in the bid process in case there was an overage, we could drop one.
We treated the lower level garage at Station 2 as a bid alternate, just in case.
Just because I'm curious quickly, one vehicle back-end rail system on a 3? What is
What's that?
the scope? A one vehicle back-end rail system for 3 vehicles?
So they'll put one in each bay.
Got it.
If you look at some of the other stations that are long, where they're double
Double
deep,
deep, okay.
they'll do a single rail with dual back-ends.
So it's 3, one vehicle per rail. I gotcha. Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns on the IFB?
No.
The only question I had for Brian was, the front part of it, I think it's what, sections 1, 2, or all the way up to 6. The rest of it's just all legal stuff, correct?
Correct.
That has to be in there? Because I was reading through it and I'm like, I don't understand all this.
There's a certain point where we all glaze over a little and go, Brian, is it the right language, I hope?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did read through it, but it was confusing me.
The only thing I think we care about making sure that you're comfortable with is everything from sections 1 through 5.
And I did read through that several times, and I was good with all that.
Yeah, everything from 6 on is just the standard stuff. We're proposing releasing it August 16th with a due date in mid-September so that we can bring the bid results to the 3 of you for an award.
Just one quick thing just came to mind. I was thinking of it earlier. You mentioned the lower level of Moore Street would be an option. If we chose not to exercise that option, we just don't utilize it for parking, or?
There's not, so that's a newer vehicle, it's held down there, it's a 2017, it's a gas truck. The big contaminants come from the bigger diesel exhausts, especially with them being older, they're not as clean as the newer ones. They don't have as much filtering systems in there, so they don't put the pollutants into the air as much.
And the listing as a bid alternate is more of a financial strategy. If all of the bids came back and we made it part of the base bid and it put us over the 150, we may not be able to award the procurement. Presenting it as a bid alternate may give you some leeway when making the award and considering the bid results that are turned in. But based on the current estimates the chief has, we expect that all 3 bays can be done for the amount of money that's been appropriated. So it's more like a contingency plan as opposed to anything that we're concerned that we need to do. If you'd like it changed to be part of the base bid, we could do that.
No, just
Okay.
making sure we're,
Of course.
I think from a risk and overall impact standpoint is the one to leave off if we ran out of funds and had to do it in a future date, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Which hopefully won't be the case. Do we want to review it further, or are we good to release? If we're good,
We're
does
good to
someone wanna
release.
Make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the release of the invitation for bids for the exhaust capture system installation project number 202-30816 as written.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you'll do the release on that, Brian?
Yeah, we'll do the legal ads probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Get everything ready for next week.
What are you up to next, Jake?
I'm just going down in no particular order. So next is library.
Library.
At 8:14.
Okay, thank you.
Just note that finance doesn't have a quorum, but for discussion. Note that finance does not have a quorum, just for discussion. So we have a memo, but if we just want to kind of capture the highlights and what are notable items for FY24 that you raised.
Sure, I'll just start with that in brief and then elaborate as needed.
Perfect.
So for FY24, the library is asking to increase our programs budget by $1,500. The budget is currently $3,000. The average library program costs about $500 or more, and we have 3 distinct user groups that we're aiming for: adults, teens, and younger children. So with about $3,000, we can afford about 6 programs a year. That is obviously not what we're offering, because we get lots of grant funding, and the Friends support us, and the Cultural Council, and we have lots of volunteers who run programs. But this money really helps us supplement one of the main things that Erving residents come to the library for. Obviously come for books and DVDs as well, but our programs are really what bring people in, and then they get a library card, and then they explore the services more. So that's really significant for us. It was our main ask for FY24, and we cut that ask when we were requested to, and it'd be great to have that back. The one other thing that we need to make sure is accounted for is that in order to be compliant with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, the library's budget must reflect 20% spent on materials. So anytime we increase any line in our budget at all, whether it's electricity or programs or staff wages, which is also happening for FY24, the library's materials budget line must also increase. Just to clarify, the materials line is spent on any circulating item, which is basically anything that we can put a barcode on. So for instance, our public computing, which is a standard desktop, does not get a barcode on it. However, if we were to buy new laptops for people to use in the library, those laptops would get a barcode. They could be spent from the materials budget. So any of the books, DVDs, library of things, garden tools, the power tools collection that we hope to build, anything like that is going to come from the materials budget. Just to clarify what that purpose is. We're not talking about FY25 at this point, right?
Not quite yet, but we
Okay.
can roll into that or ask questions on 24 first, whichever the group would
I'll
prefer.
stick with FY24 for now and see
Okay.
if there are any
Sounds
questions.
good.
Brian, what did the library turn, what was left in their budget from last year?
Stand by.
Standing by.
Excuse me, while we're waiting on the number. What are the repercussions if we don't have the 20% to be in compliance with MPLC?
We would no longer be certified by the state as a library able to participate in the state services, including shared borrowing from other libraries.
Oh,
It's very serious.
Yeah. I take that seriously.
Yes, I know you do.
Yeah, 20% increase on the $1,500 increase is $300, added to that
Right.
line item. It's not,
Right, I think the
It's just making
wages
sure we do
increase
it.
this year is gonna affect that a little bit more.
right.
The library did also see a significant increase in electricity last year, which was reflected in our regular budget that was approved. But it was significant, so I don't wanna skip over that in any way.
Because of things like electricity and some wage changes, we actually went into the negative on the library budget.
Okay.
So we were negative 21,000, but we had surplus in other budgets within the group.
Yeah, so our omnibus spending was in the clear.
Correct.
However, the electricity and wages were significant.
Right.
So we've corrected that this year.
Right.
And so I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the FY24 currently approved was at least that much higher?
Yes.
Okay, that sounds correct. Assuming, but
And I just want to clarify that 20% increase, because you said staffing wages will change that this year. That was all built into the FY24 budget?
Yes.
The wages approved at the time.
And
Yes.
the effect it will have on that 20% was all built into the budget
Yes.
already? Okay.
The wages that were changed since the FY24 budget was approved have yet to be calculated.
Right, so
That will have
that,
to, but he will decide it in
the
June.
new table that we just
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
Yeah.
save for the 20%, which will resolve, I'm sure.
Right.
The funding for the wages is there, it's just
Correct.
transfer later.
Right. As far as the 24 request, I don't have any concerns about adding that into the conversation of, the overall pool. You're talking under $2,000 with the 20% and the,
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about the new wage table and salaries going up. So should that 1,500 be higher so that we don't have to worry about making sure that 20% of the budget is in materials?
Well, I think we've asked for 1,500 additional for programs.
Okay.
On that one line. And to be clear, we have 3,000 now, so that's a 50% increase on programs.
But then the salaries are also going to go up.
In which case, the materials budget will need to scale.
Right. Yes.
Right? And
Yes,
so in
yes.
the
I'm
future, it'd
sorry.
be great if we could add more to programs, but I feel like asking for 50% increase on that line is more than enough to get us started in the right direction. And we'll continue to do our work with grants and the Friends and volunteers and other programs to supplement it.
I was confusing the materials with the program budget.
That's
Sorry.
understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, we will be asking for more to supplement the materials budget accordingly in order to stay certified.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't have that exact number because the wages hadn't been calculated when I submitted this.
So I'm a little confused with the we got solar. How much of an offset are we looking at here with the solar, with the electrical bill?
I don't have an exact percentage for you, but I can give you an example. So in the winter, I think our highest bill was $7,000 or $8,000 for heating. And the
A
solar
month?
isn't as active then, right?
Per month or for the whole season?
For a month. The highest month was about that. It's a big facility and was designed with a lot of open spaces. However, during the summer, the last bill that I got, even with cooling, was $800. So I don't have an exact percentage. We're asking the contractor for a solar array review. Brian, we had asked
The architect.
the architects,
Civil engineers, right?
the civil engineers, to do an analysis for us. It'd be great for the people who built the system to make sure that it's working the way they planned.
And that's getting done, because I know there's been a lot of, I'll say, opinions about whether or not the solar is delivering what we were anticipating we were going to get out of spending on that,
We
right?
previously
in return.
requested both the production and the usage. What we received back at that time, I want to say this was last summer, we finally got it from the engineers, was a analysis of the building usage in comparison to the model that had been created. I don't believe I've seen a copy of the solar array production. So I believe that's what's outstanding.
Yes.
if that's modeling as designed and
designed.
then offsetting as expected to the cost.
This is what I'm
And-
gonna regret throwing away all my notes from the building committee.
We have not paid the last invoice to the company that owes that to us.
Good. Good.
Smart move.
Thank you, Brian.
I know it's expensive, but it feels, I think we all agree, 7,000 or 8,000 in the winter and not zero in the summer feels odd, at least for those who have residential,
Yeah.
renewable energy, and it's not the same modeling, and I think that's part of the challenge to wrap my head around it at least, but,
Yeah, and I'm not a solar expert or an HVAC expert.
right.
But I will say that some of the numbers for the library's budget when the new facility was built were approximate.
Right.
So the electricity started as a $10,000 line. That may or may not be appropriate for the facility that we're running. And so now we're making those adjustments. Now that we're 3 years into the building, we know what it needs.
There's also a need to look at the kilowatt usage over time to see if that's actually what's increasing, or is there more of a correlation to the cost changes that we experienced over the past year? And what's the significance of either of those? If it's truly a consumption change, then that's something that we need to budget
Of
going
course.
forward.
Yep.
If it's instead a rate issue, we may be able to look at ways to mitigate the rate changes across all town departments and facilities. So I think it's a two-pronged.
Also like to acknowledge for the community that people have noticed the lights being on at strange times, and we are still waiting for access to the lighting system to control that. So we're doing our best by turning things off manually when we leave the facility, and otherwise we are waiting for that access. One of the vendors, I believe.
Well, it's another one of the open items where the vendor said they were done, and I don't think they were personally from my side, and I think we're going back and forth on that.
And you and I are on the same page that we don't have what we need.
No,
So
No,
I don't think it was completed,
right.
in my opinion.
we have an environmental control system that allegedly is not operating functionally and controlling our environmental.
I don't believe they've finished configuring and giving us access to manage it. So it's doing something, not necessarily what we want it to do at the right times of the day. Nor can, at the moment, change it or. And to be fair, there's also a question, there has been a lot of change in there's been change in directors throughout COVID. As COVID came on, new building change is happening constant, and then new people too. So did we lose something in transition and it didn't get transferred, knowledge or whatever? And is that actually, ours to now just get up to speed, if you will?
Right.
I think is, to be fair, is maybe the case, but I'm leaning towards not.
Well, and in my past 15 months as director, I think we've accomplished a lot with the building, and we'll continue to do that.
The assessment we had done the data we got back last year should have been energy usage, not dollars, right? Versus the original
Consumption.
energy model. So this is, it should be consumption and generation in kilowatts in BTUs, not in dollars.
Right.
The dollars is rate changes.
The
Keep
consumption
that separate.
for that period that was evaluated, the consumption was very similar in its modeling to what had been projected.
Okay. Over
So-
an annual life
Right.
period.
It
Okay.
wasn't a perfect one for one. I don't think anybody
Well,
anticipated that, but the use curves were modeling very similar to what had been anticipated. So from that standpoint, it looked like the building was functioning at the time, the way it was designed. So the generation is I think the open question.
We don't know what the solar system's generating.
No, we do. The question is it modeling, or is it generating the same as the models when the civil engineers designed the system?
Okay.
Is it delivering as designed?
Correct.
It's generating, and we can look at what it is.
Yes.
We have monitoring. The question about whether the front panels shade the back panels, but hopefully get that answer while we're getting that analysis done.
You'd think that would come with the array analysis.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Or at least there'll be a delta, and then we can dig into why, if it's not the same. Other questions on FY24 library? Got a little in the weeds there. Sorry, Dan. Did you want to? You know you're recused, but do you want to offer a
I
comment?
don't want to comment on the library budget,
Okay.
so there's no conflict, but on the general discussion, which is good that we're having, about is the solar array generating what we're told it would generate is one question, and is the building functioning and needing the electric needs like we were told it would be. So find the answer to those two things. Typically, it's not a library trustee issue or a library director issue, but our director has jumped in both feet and understands the issues quite well and works closely with Brian, so that to satisfy the needs of the taxpayers, we are looking at it all the time, and we're amazed at how much it costs. But if the kilowatt hours generated are accurate as predicted, and the needs of the building are accurate as predicted, or fairly close, and it's one of those, it is what it is. Unless we change something, add solar, or do something different, it is what it is. And it's, as long as it's accurate, and we weren't misled in either direction, here we are. So, and thank you for jumping in and being on top of all that stuff, which many library directors are not needing to do.
Comes with the benefit of a new building, I will say, though.
Yeah, okay.
There's pros and cons, but
Yeah.
it is nice to have a new building, although it comes with its own challenges. As every department head, Paula can talk to you about energy usage challenges for hours, I'm sure, from over the years here.
I did have one other question that may be germane to anybody who wonders if it's justified to have such a budget for the library. We had the summer reading club event ended. Do you know the total count? We have a thing that counts now who comes through the door.
I'm very happy that we have an automatic people counter now, because I was looking at last year's numbers and either traffic has gone up and we weren't counting enough. So this year, 228 was the count for Thursday, over 500 for the week.
So it's great to know that people are using the facility that they paid for, and those who aren't using it, we encourage them to give it a try.
Last summer, that week was 197.
That's a big increase,
Yes.
300% or so.
And like I said, part of that's because we were keeping track with hash marks, and part of that's because the traffic has increased.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to acknowledge, we finally got leads.
Yes.
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 Saw
Got the
that.
leads. The money is coming. I don't think it's not in the bank yet, but checks in the mail, quote unquote, right? We will get it. It is done. We are certified.
We're certified, and we've signed the contracts with MBLC for the grant funding that had been sought.
So, one big one that was open.
Yep.
Check. Thank you all for that efforts. Okay, FY24. On to FY20.
FY24. Could you just refresh my memory? What was the drivers for the overage of the budget? Was it all just the electricity expenses?
Predominantly.
Electricity and wages
Right.
were the two things that went over significantly last year. Electricity is really the big one. The two wage lines went over, one because we had promotions that were long overdue. And then the other one is that we needed substitute help to cover when we needed additional staffing or coverage for staff absences. That budget line was only $1,000. And so we had, I think, 2,500 or a bit more that was spent on that line. I'm sure Brian can get you an exact number. So one of the things that I asked for was bump to $3,000 for the substitute wages for FY24.
Okay.
And that was part of our approved numbers. So we should be able to cover what we need from that budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess my next question would be, given that it's, I don't want this to sound flippant, but it's $2,000, do you feel that you would be able to find that within your current FY24 budget to restore those programs?
No.
Okay.
We would be finding other ways to run the programs
Okay,
or not offering as many.
okay.
Other FY24 questions? FY25 and beyond. Please.
All right. So because we're seeing an increase in traffic and program demand and staffing coverage needs, in FY25, our first request will be an additional part-time position, a library assistant, which is the previous job description that the current staff members held. So we now have an assistant director and a youth services librarian, and we'd like to backfill library assistant. It'll be a 14 to 19-hour-a-week position, non-benefited, that will work on Sundays and Tuesdays and fill in to help when staff have other absences that are approved by the director. So right now, the library has 3 staff in place on 3 days a week and 2 staff in place on 2 days a week. 2 staff is our absolute minimum staffing level, according to what has been approved by the trustees for running such a facility. So if we have any absence issues on Sunday or Tuesday, we immediately have to go to that subline budget and try to get staff, or we're running curbside services or closing the building. So our first priority is to be able to make sure that that building is open 5 days a week for the community, and this position will help us to do that. We are asking for a library assistant, which is a base position that requires a high school diploma and some job experience. We're also anticipating needing a line for the makerspace supplies. The makerspace uses consumables, so it does not come out of the materials budget. Right now, we try to find room in the programs budget to buy supplies for the makerspace, but we're looking at considering it a separate line because it is such a aspect of the facility as well, and a different type of space and service offered. We also want to account for any potential increases to building maintenance, facility monitoring, and software, because those costs do increase over time, and eventually we will need to add increases to those budgets. And also accordingly, our materials budget will need to increase for those, to account for those changes to comply to the 20% as required by the MBLC. That's all I got. Hopefully we don't have to increase electricity again.
Could you elaborate a little on what you mean by facility monitoring?
Sure. So the facility monitoring line includes the security camera software and the alarm systems and the automatic locking systems, which are subscription services with third-party companies to make sure that we can properly monitor the facility. So I'm anticipating that even if we make no changes to those systems, that those contracts could increase over time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, wastewater.
If you would like.
Is it optional?
No, it is not.
I was just thinking the same thing. huh?
Right? Like, is this optional?
Not in
Does somebody need to say, I'll allow it?
Yeah, right? Welcome. So, same as we've been doing, if you want to just run highlights through what your FY24 concerns, risks, questions, or, requests are, and then we'll do Q&A from there.
Okay, a couple of my, basically my line items, I'd like to have increased. Some of them would be obvious, electricity and fuel. That's still going up. I believe we talked about increasing them before when we went over this. So those two were two of the concerns. The other line items that I'm concerned about, we started a testing services for the wastewater. We started that in November, so it's been about 8 months. And currently now we're up to $10,000 for testing services, so I'm figuring for a year's worth of testing services, and if those still go up a little bit, like 20,000 for a starting point. That's a line that Deb created, so we can keep track of how much we're spending on testing. Then the other line item also would be under chemicals. Currently, right now, it's at about 18,000. We're over by about 600, so I'm thinking, possibly increasing that another 5, because the cost of chemicals are still climbing a little bit. And then the big one would be sludge disposal, which currently it was set at 32,000. And right now, going by the end of June, we're over probably by about 10,000, so that would probably want to bump up maybe another 15 to anticipate the prices going up a little bit more. And that's pretty much my main concerns.
So I have some questions on everyone else. Testing, the 10,000 or more, so is that what you already have budgeted? I know you carved it out, but as a separate line, which I'm assuming you didn't have before?
We didn't have it before. No, we started keeping track of it in November of '22.
But you had funding you were using before, it just wasn't tracked separately?
Right. We're taking out of, I believe it was the lab line item, I think is what it was.
How much of that were you shifting over? 10?
Say that.
How much of that was shifted over? I guess I'm trying to understand if it's 20, if you think it's going to cost 20 annually, how much was shifted over? How much do we already have in the budget?
We didn't really shift anything over. We just kind of just started keeping track of it, and we just kind of cut it as we went, cut it out. I believe that's how it worked.
I think what he's asking is
Yeah.
currently that line item under labs for FY 20, 21, 22, 23.
Yep.
You had a line item that you expended funds from to pay for the testing. You're paying for it differently with its own line item now, so it's still coming out of a new line item, but so did you decrease that lab line item by 10,000 and put that into another line item?
I don't believe we did that one.
So then the funds are still there, is what so if you're not utilizing it out of the lab line item and you're utilizing this new line item that was created, you're attributing it to a new line item, but the financial money is still there.
So just to be clear, it's not that we weren't doing testing before, but with the FD's permit, the testing changed. But what you had budgeted last year was 15,000 for lab,
Right.
and you had nothing testing. It just was separated. What you expended was 15,000 for testing, 11,000 for lab.
So it was a shortage, or an overage, I should say, last year.
Correct.
Okay. That's what he was trying to get at.
Thank you. So it sounds like you were over, now that we separated out and counted for it and the new requirements, you were underfunded by about 10, and that you didn't budget that into 24, is that correct, currently?
Currently, yeah, because from November to now, I'm figuring 8 months, we're up to like roughly 10,000. I figure if we add another 10 to that, it'll give us a little bit of buffer, because you're talking another 4 months till the end of June. Well, we went to June. So as of the end of June, we had spent like 10, and then we got another 4, figuring the rotation of a whole year, you'd have another 4 months. So to have a little buffer in there.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, those other questions?
So just on that, on the testing services, so from November 2022 until June 30 of 2023, you spent approximately 10,000 on testing.
Correct.
Okay, got it. On the line, like say 4 with the chemicals, so you're if I'm reading this correctly, your FY 2023 was 18,000 and your total FY '23 was 18,600. Am I reading that the right way? Saying that you're over by 600?
Correct.
Okay. And so on line 5, the currently at 32,000 was your FY '23 budget, and you spent 42,000 in '23?
Yes. Okay, you're going by my list here, yes.
Right, I'm just, the way
Yes.
you worded it, I'm trying to make sure that I understand it.
So at the end of June, we were over by roughly 10,000, and it was set at 32.
Right, okay. That's, so 42, so if you went from 32, add 15, 30, 47, you got about a $5,000 buffer.
Right,
Okay, I'm tracking now.
Well,
because the costs are probably, I'm sure they're gonna go up again.
which is causing me a little confusion because I'm looking at the budget book that was put out and I have the sludge line as being at 42,000 and I don't see where that was ever cut back to 32,000.
You have the FY '24 budget book? Okay, because I think Pete's referring to FY '23
Yeah.
budget and
Right.
'23,
Where we're short on
what you
23.
think we should go, but that was part of my first question was, but how much was budgeted, so what's the delta there? So if the budget is 42, not 32, then what we need is not 15 or whatever, right? It's 5?
Right.
Is that,
Correct, another 5 then.
Correct.
That
'Cause
would-
on,
Okay.
it says it's currently at 32,000, over by at least 10, but we budgeted 42. So is the ask for another 15 or is the ask for another 5?
With another 5 then. Because when we had talked about it, we did some changes. When the time when me, you, and Brian were in Brian's office and we trying to figure out what we're gonna need.
for
and
FY
we cut it
'24?
to finish out 23.
Right, but let me back up. Maybe there's some confusion. The ask is from where the approved FY '24 budget is today with what we know now to meet services, or if there's any changes or anything significant that we have not funded or we cut because of where we were for the budget 3 months ago. What are those items? So, and I understand, I'll pick sludge because it's the one we're on.
Right.
Currently 32, that's not current. That's FY '23, it was 32. Currently, it's 42, right? According to the approved budget.
Correct.
Right.
So the approved budget's 42. So from 42, are you good? You're saying, no, that's not enough, you don't think. Where would
Okay,
that bring us? Do
yep.
you see what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yep.
this, I think, if I'm reading this, is more of a where we should go from '23 budget and actual.
Correct.
This is not a summary of where to go from '24 approved budget to anticipated '24 actual cost. Does that make sense?
Right,
Yeah.
so that's,
Okay.
So,
So I think what's here is data, but it's not exactly what we were expecting or looking for tonight, right?
so I guess where I go from here is, if you have those lines in the '24 budget, can we do some simple math and figure out what the actual restoration number would be to get to where Pete thinks we need to be?
So if we start at the top for testing services, we're at 12,000 for FY '24.
That's the budgeted amount?
That was the budgeted amount.
So, if I may, before you continue on, so you're thinking we need 20 for a year for testing?
Yes.
So we're short about 8 there. So number one would be about 8 more.
Fuel and gas. There's a lot of numbers in that number.
Fuel and gas
There we go. 22.5.
is what we budgeted.
Yep,
It didn't go up from 23, so that stayed level.
yep.
But
What was actual? I don't have it in front of me.
0? Am I reading that right, Brian? For 23? Fuel and gas, we spent 0?
I think we missed the number.
No.
No?
No, we spent none because we had a lot of extra, right? We like
Remember we had
overfilled
that-
the
yes,
tank or
we-
something went wrong, and so actual fuel, we put more in than we normally would in the year before.
Right,
Typically fill
So we
in
didn't,
April.
so we didn't fill it in fiscal 23.
correct.
But we will need to fill it in fiscal 24, which is why we had all that conversation, because it was 0 and it stuck in my head.
Right.
We spent none, but budgeted the full amount again
Correct.
Right.
because of that. And you're saying now it could go up,
Right.
but you don't know.
We haven't found out what, we're not locked in yet. Blocks, are we?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. So TBD. We have a number there, we just don't know.
We have 70,000 for electricity.
And that was an increase.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because we spent 80 in 23. But we're hoping that they don't go up as high as they did.
Right.
I think that's where we came out of this year, was to say we want to go close but not as high, I hope.
And last but not least, chemicals was 18.
That's what we budgeted?
We budgeted 18,000.
Okay. So that one, you are thinking, because costs went up and we went over that and spend 5,000, I think that number looks like it's the right number.
Yep.
And then down to sludge, we budgeted 42, spent 47, and it's not getting cheaper. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going up.
So it's more than 5.
Well,
I
we
think,
spent
right?
47 or we spent 42?
I just have that we budgeted for FY24, we budgeted 42,000.
You haven't
We
spent
spent-
47?
Yeah, we spent 47, where am I here, sorry. Yeah, just totally lost it. There it is, 47.2.
So you're thinking at least
50, I mean, I don't know how much it's gone up year over year, so I don't have a sense of that, but what do you think? I mean, does it go up a little every year? Is it sometimes, is it a lot?
We had a good climb this past year, and I'm sure we're gonna get charged more. Just because of the fuel cost is gonna factor in for them to haul it, just to dispose of their Lowell.
So you're thinking add 8 more and bring it up to 50? No, I'm sorry, 55.
We're budgeted at 42. We spent 47. Want to get to 45, we're talking 13?
Yeah, I was just gonna say FY22
Or
expended
55,
was
I'm sorry.
31,000 and change. So it was like a $16,000 jump between FY22 and 23. Can you speak to that? Was there something extraordinary to cause such a jump between 22 and 23, or is that just kind of the way it works?
Lately, that's the way it works.
Okay.
I mean, we have increased the loads going out, by a couple loads a year. That's a whole nother issue where that's coming from.
The volume increase, you mean?
Excuse
The
me?
volume has increased that we're sending out, is that what you're saying?
Yes, we used to average like 2 loads every 6 weeks. Now we're like 3 loads every 6 weeks. And I've been trying to hold it back as long as I can.
50% more would be $16,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that went up in a year. I'm assuming that didn't go up in 1 year.
No.
Okay. But was there a site that closed last year as well, or was that further back?
They don't haul to Upper Blackstone anymore.
Okay.
So everything goes to Lowell. If Lowell's down for a few days, we hold the loads, but then we get them out afterwards, so,
Okay, so that wasn't a big impact.
no.
Okay. 55, 60, I don't know. I don't know, but definitely 42 isn't the number, I think.
No.
So,
It was almost a $70,000 jump just in one fiscal year, so.
I mean, I'd be over 60, but I just, take a stab at it, at least get to 55 or 60.
I'd say
I think, right?
55. So that's what, plus 13?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
We just need an estimate to
Yeah,
ballpark.
something to put in here and get,
Create a
get
table and
further.
look at what we're at. We didn't talk about dollar amount for fuel and gas, the 22.5, whether or not that would be, I don't know what the rates are right now for filling that tank. They're up, fuel's up right now.
Let's see, I got whacked pretty good the other day.
The fact that we didn't fill it last year makes it a little harder, because now we got a 2-year gap between when we filled it last
Yeah.
and
Right,
I don't
and
know
they
what our
won't-
normal used to be before, like, the abnormal.
They won't come make a delivery neither until you get down to the certain, I have to get below 1,000 gallons in that 10,000 gallon tank before to make a delivery.
So what's the average cost right now? So you're looking at a 9,000.
I mean, I don't know, this is fuel and propane? This is,
Fuel and propane comes out of that line item.
no idea. I guess probably for that one, I would say, can you go take a look at what we've spent in prior years to fill it normally?
Okay.
And then obviously there's an escalation to that, but I just don't know what our normal is, because we didn't even spend last year, so I think, we'll ask for that and get a number back on what was it on average? Were we averaging 15, 16? Should it have been 17 and now we're at 18? I don't know, what's the trend? Like, is there something to give us a data point to start with, right? Does that make sense to everybody?
Well, on the gas, you said it's 10,000 gallon tank and has to be below 1,000, so you're looking at a $9,000 fill at what's the current rate per gallon?
Well, that's what I was figuring out. Is you're going to order 9,000 gallons.
Yeah,
What's the
I'm
current
somewhere
rate?
in the 30 grand range if I'm doing my math right.
Yeah, probably right around there. That's what I was thinking.
And then
Yikes.
there's 1,000 gallon propane tanks at the stations, which comes out of that also.
Yeah,
And then there's the 500 gallon fuel tank for the generator.
Can you hone in on that number a little bit closer? Just because it seems like because of the skipped year, it's going to be a larger number.
Okay.
And we need to make sure we have, just that one tank is going to be more than what the line item is. So we need to know better.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you're skipping, like 18 months of fuel increases that we've had?
That's where
Plus,
yeah.
I mean,
it's not
that
going
number's
to it's not
just
going to be just it's 2 years
skyrocketing.
worth. It could be triple
Yeah.
because of,
Automatically buy us a lot of Powerball tickets.
yeah.
Hey, if I win, we'll pay for your fuel.
1.55 billion will go a
I'll
long
even
way.
make a donation.
What's that?
and the mill.
And the mill.
They have to fill that 9,000 every time, they couldn't do half. Because if it's lasted us 2 years, it could be a gamble we take, like
We would
fuel
have
could
called
go
for,
down or.
so what happened was we would have called for fuel last year. But when the year before that, when I called and asked for delivery, and I said, this is what I had left for money, not to exceed this amount, well, they exceeded it. So then that's kind of threw us off that year.
But I think, to Thomas's point, that whole premise of you have to have less than 1,000 gallons doesn't mean you have to put 9,000 in.
They only like to come out with a tanker, so that's 8,000 gallons.
It's priced different for tanker load versus a truck.
Right.
Right. And they can only put in X amount because they have to account for what they call utilage,
Yeah.
which
This
is
is
the
the only site we
expansion.
have a TT unit to deliver. Everything else is a metered delivery.
Metered, right. And this is diesel.
Correct, and we get the Caro additive, so it doesn't
Yeah.
gel up on us.
So it's a
So I'm not
It's a
saying
full
it's
tank
cheaper,
order then.
but it's also a tanker load. It's not the same as going to the pump.
Yeah, we'll have to look back at
to
what
your
they-
point. So we need more data. I think it's,
Okay.
to summarize, I mean, it's getting late and I just want to give
Yep.
everybody some time.
Okay.
We need better data on current propane rates, estimated annual usage to what you're gonna have to fill. You know you're gonna need 8,000 gallon tanker. Take the average rate right now if you have to, whatever that looks like at the tanker
Yeah.
load, so. Get us some
Just so
better
we can
numbers.
plug in numbers on those
Versus
couple of
22.5.
items. Right, yeah.
And then what's that delta?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Back on the 21st with that?
yes, please.
Okay.
Peter put a note about the mission on here and I didn't really elaborate. So we had I'll just elaborate a little bit. We had a telecom discussion the other day with all the department heads about telecom costs and all the departments, or all the sites really. And there's a lot of them for all the pump stations and the well and all of those things. Some of that stuff, we have those lines because we have to have monitoring and alerts and alarms and all of that. The Mission 123, Mission 123 systems that we put in at Arch Street and at River Street have been performing extremely well. They alleviate that because they're cellular. The annual costs are less and they're more reliable. So there's all kinds of other economies of savings with that. And offsets to the monthly we pay right now to Comcast or Verizon or whoever. So we had talked about looking at what would it take to upfit them all, switch them all over to Mission, cellular monitoring, install the equipment, and then the cellular monitoring. The cellular monitoring is less or monthly than we pay right now for telecom at those sites. So, and it's a pump station. Nobody's going there to make a call or watch TV or get on the internet. So as long as it can call out when it needs to and more reliably. That may be a question if we wanted to fund that as a capital item, because maybe it's 10,000 to do 5 sites and then they're all done and it's a one-time and now we're going to save $2,000 a year for indefinitely. I don't know, but that's what that comes from. So we're going to get more data if we have it for the 21st.
Okay. You want to wait till then for that?
You have it tonight?
Some of it, yes. I can
When
wait.
do you have all of it?
When I have all of it, okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I will say, Pete, one of the big questions we'll have is, how many sites exactly are you looking at doing? What is the cost per site?
Mm-hmm.
And any other, is there gonna be any
Annual recurring monitoring
annual recurring
costs.
fees? Well, I'm thinking of, I wanna say construction, but that's not the right word. Is there any type of, installation or improvements that will be needed at the site in order for this to go in and work properly?
Oh, got it.
So infrastructure
And-
upgrades?
Yes, thank you.
That's the word.
It's getting late.
And we will want to bring what we're spending on monthly costs now,
Yeah.
because there's a savings there.
There's
So
a
there's a
big
payback.
savings.
There's an ROI on that, so we can
Including
try
the
to
callback
generate
thing,
that.
The callbacks.
Since we've had those, since Mission's been put in at River Street, we've had no false alarms.
Yay.
None. Zip.
What was his nickname? The guy from Westfield? He had to come out for a call and it was costing you X amount of dollars and he had.
Oh, yeah.
He had a special
yeah.
nickname for the guy?
Yeah. No,
Come
we
back
don't
to
see
that
them.
So we'll hopefully have that next time.
Yep.
We'll have the one-time install cost per site. We'll have the recurring cost and the savings from the current recurring cost.
Yes. I'm
The-
just waiting now for, because you said to add in the water, what it would cost for that. So that's going to be a little bit more technical to do.
Okay.
But I'll get it.
It's important. And some of it's included in the project already for the mixer. So that one's not an added cost. That's already expected.
For
The mixer, for
right.
Mission.
It'll be set up so we can add the Mission right to it.
But it was in
Which-
scope
which-
to add it. It's in scope to add it?
2 different vendors,
Right.
Yeah.
but the funding is in the project.
That's my point. It is not something that we need in this calculation. It's already funded in the project. Okay.
Okay.
Water department.
The only concern is the line item well and pump station, and we've gone over at the end of at the end of June, as of those numbers, we've gone over by about 8,000 for your total. A lot of stuff gets taken out of that one line item, but I think the one contributing cost is the electricity.
Do you do you have what you budgeted 24, and is that the flat, or do we need the full 8, do you know? If you don't have it in front of you, you can bring it next week,
Okay.
because I don't have the budget in front of me either. So yeah, just go back and check that one, and we'll see what that number should be.
Okay.
Questions for Pete?
No, we'll wait for the 21st.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Yep.
So, I'm jumping around a little. Mariah offered to go last. We're gonna go a little bit longer, but appreciate everybody showing up. But we've got some business after this too, so the board can't go too late tonight.
Correct.
Assessors, I see you're here, but I think it says you can come up, but am I reading this right, that you're meeting on the 21st, so we won't have it till next meeting? Or
No, we have it.
Okay.
I sent a memo to Brian, the assessor saw it, well, the chair saw it,
Okay,
right? Yes?
yes. I read the beginning, it said the board wasn't meeting till the 21st, so I was assuming that meant
I
we
told
wouldn't
Brian
have
I would
data
make
till the
7th
21st.
meeting, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So you want to touch on it just high level, what the increase, it looks like there's some concern on increases.
Yes, so for the fiscal '24 budget, the assessors would appreciate if we could put the $25,000 back in the legal expense line that we cut at the request. We had $50,000 originally. When we were asked to cut the budget, we cut 25 out of that line. But as you know, we are fighting First Light, and our court case is coming up at the end of September, the last week of September, the first week of February. I've already spent $100,000 to get ready for this case, and that doesn't count the time that, or the funding we're going to have to spend for the appraiser to do the deposition and et cetera, nor my time or expenses when we actually go to trial. We do have some funding left in there, but I did dip into it severely over the past couple months. Also, if we have the funding, the $100,000 that we slashed from the overlay, we only have $2 million in there. That's really not enough if we were to lose with the appellate tax board. Those are the two wish lists. If I had to prioritize, the $25,000 for the legal expenses would be the one that I would wish. And if you won the Powerball or whatever is going up, you could give me the $100,000 for the overlay. Not me personally, but the town. And the only other thing, unless anybody has any questions for 24, is the potential for fiscal year 25.
24 questions before we jump into 25?
Well, I guess, I just want to clarify, because you do start the memo by saying the assessors have not met, so they have not. Did they talk about that this is what they want to put forth, or is this what you're recommending, or is this from the assessors?
Oh, well, the chair has read it and he was fine with that. The other two chose not to respond back to me separately, so I can't tell you that. But the request from the select board was to be ready for the 7th, so I did the best I could with my department.
I would
And-
just,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I would just question is there the chance that the assessors, when they meet on the 21st, are gonna want other things, or?
No. Not for fiscal year '24.
Okay.
This isn't, I'm saying it because it's an open question in my mind, not because it's yours to answer, but just to put it out there. the overlay piece is a little confusing to me because if I recall an annual town meeting, the assessor said that one of the, Board of Assessor members said that there was little risk and the 2 million was more than enough, which is part of why we're here. And that we, don't have a budget issue in terms of enough to cover because we weren't likely to lose. And I'm not looking for you to answer this, but this is just when they meet on the 21st, when you meet with them, if you would relay that. Do we have a risk? And if so, then what is that really? Or do we not think we have much of a risk? Because that was a big point, I think, at annual town meeting that changed essentially how people would have spent money that night. And that's a significant concern. Again, I'm not putting that on you to answer. I want to be very clear.
I have been an assessor for 25 years. Principal assessor for maybe 10, maybe a little bit more than that. There's always a risk when you go before the appellate tax board. Does the board feel we have a strong case? Yes, we do. We're doing everything we can to present our case to the commissioners that our value is the right one. However, that is not a guarantee. I honestly don't know what the impact is. In previous meetings with the assessors and with the select board and the finance committee, I have given you a possible scenario case of a 30% reduction without interest. That amounts to about $11 or $12 million. I, again, will bring up without interest, because interest is 14, I'm sorry, no, it's, yeah.
I think 8%.
It's 8%.
But it goes back to.
But it goes back to the date that they filed. We are going before the appellate tax board for 4 fiscal years. Fiscal year 19, 20, 21, and 22. It may take the appellate tax board 6 months to issue a decision, or up to a year.
Will they issue a decision, do you know, for all years at once, or is it one at a time, potentially?
No, they'll issue a decision for all, the
It's a
case is being
cumulative.
tried as one bulk. So we're trying multiple years all at once, so they'll issue the decision at once, but it could take 6 months to a year to get a decision.
Thank you for the summary. I share your concerns. I share the risk. I mean, we all share the risk, and I'd like to be optimistic, but I am concerned too. So that's why I raised the comment in the group to just, we're talking about potential FY 24-25. I think by that calendar, that's when it's going to hit. One of the two. If we lose for whatever value we lose, that's when we're going to be looking at least starting to try to have to make good on that.
In my professional opinion, we will not escape unscathed. I think that would be unrealistic to think that.
You said we have 2 million approximately in overlay?
Yes, we have 2 million in overlay. Now, to put you on a happier note, even though we had to talk about depressing stuff, the Eversource ATV hearing was withdrawn for fiscal year 21, and I anticipate it'll be withdrawn for 22. My professional association, the Massachusetts Assessors Association, is working with them to get the cases withdrawn, because we were dictated by the Department of Revenue how to value the facility, how to value utilities. So they're working together, they're working on an agreement, and one of the agreements would be for them to withdraw the remaining 110 cases they have pending. Of that, we are one of them. So we have one withdrawal, and we anticipate the second one to be withdrawn.
Excellent. We'll take good news any day.
Yes, I'm trying.
Thank you. Sorry, that was my question, concern, statement, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Thank you. Other questions, concerns, comments?
No. Nothing that's not already been said.
No, I was going to
In the
jump on
interest
to
of
the
time,
next.
Yep, please.
Of 25.
So for fiscal year 25, And we have discussed this as a board in previous discussions. We are going to seek an assessor's clerk position for probably, 10 to 15 hours a week. The assessor's office is the only office that doesn't have a backup. And if I won the lottery, I don't know if I'd come back to work the next day. But there isn't.
How dare you?
You care more about
But,
Erving than that, I think.
But it does bring up an interesting what-if scenario. And there isn't any measure for someone to step into the office and do the work. And we are now approaching the critical time with setting the tax rate, and it would be devastating for the town of Erving if something like that were to happen. So the really, and I am seeing this all over in other communities, is to have a part-time person come in and take care of the motor vehicle abatements and all of that, and basically learn the job, sort of, and be that, so the position would be permanent. We had discussed finding a replacement for my position when I retire, but I really think there's a need to supplement the office to have someone in place if something were to happen to that other person. At least someone that could learn on the job and continue the operations within the town. Because we do not use outside consultants other than for our utilities and for the hydroelectric facility. So it's just something for 25 I wanted to bring up that has really come about over, my pending retirement, non-pending retirement thing. So I'm still going to retire, but I'm not going to retire for a couple of years, so.
Or a couple days after you win. No,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, yeah.
Can you remote from the Turks and Caicos?
We can make that work.
That does lead me to a question, Jackie. If you were to get this position approved for FY '25, and I noticed you said you weren't retiring for a couple of years, would this be a position where a person could be trained as your replacement, and then we could
Backfill?
rehire for this position? Would that be a little bit easier, or?
It's possible. If you hired, if we hired the right motivated person, we sent them to school, they got their designation, they wouldn't be able to step into what I do seamlessly, but they would definitely be able to do the bulk of the work, and then they would have support staff, to help them with the. So part of it is, I've done this job a long time, so I have efficiencies built in that I don't even think about, and a new person coming in is not going to have that because they're still learning on the job, even if you got an experienced assessor to take the position over. And then it gives you the safeguard if something were to happen to that person, or that, you'd have somebody to run the office.
Maybe it's just because you brought some gloom here, and I'm thinking negatively now, but I'm finding it hard to see somebody that will want to come in. We talked earlier about finding, the people that want to fill these jobs and the availability in the workplace, and I'm thinking if we found somebody who wants to work 15 hours a week, would they be that same motivated person that wants to jump to 40, to full-time? I don't know. Not saying it's not, but I also understand all too well about single points of failure, risk mitigation, and continuity planning. I've learned a lot about how those hit in real world, and not because somebody won a lottery.
You're right.
But
I'm trying not to be doom and gloom here. So
No,
I was
no, no,
thinking
no,
about
I
the
know.
lottery, not
I
the
know.
other
I'll take
alternative.
responsibility for that one.
I know. I'll be Debbie Downer for a moment. I can see the value in where you're leaning towards that. I would just like to find a little more optimism that you'd find that 15-hour person that wants to turn into 40.
Well, in all honesty, that's how I started out. They hired me at 19 hours, and then the position morphed over the years. The job I've been doing currently, I've actually probably been doing it for a lot longer than I'm remembering. where, you know, I was doing most of the work myself, and this position was still an assistant assessor. You might find someone that likes the job or loves the job enough to want to make the leap, and I would recommend that if this does move forward, that we train that person and send them to professional classes. The association has some, so they would get their, you know, they would understand what they were doing, and then if they didn't want to make the leap to the, because we're talking only a couple of years, to the assistant assessor or the principal assessor position, then you could hire that out. They could work towards it, you know, in the future. I don't know, that's the problem with me trying to plan the succession part, and I don't know how long the job actually takes, because I don't think about it, right? I just do it. And I have a bunch of balls juggling in the air at all the time, and, you know, it's hard for me to have perspective of that, because I've just been doing, not too, I still love my job, just not, but enough that I can't really gauge how much time the job actually takes. I just do it in my time, in the 25 hours I work for the town.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Just in terms of wrapping the FY 25 and beyond, different
Right.
ways we might be able to make that work. So, no, that's fair, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jeff, I know you've been here. I believe, I understand the Board of Health does not have any concerns or requests for 24, I'm sorry. Is that correct? If not, come on up. I know you've been here and I wanted to get you on your way if either way.
So you've been here this long, you might as well give us
Yeah, you
your
might
2
as well
cents
come on
worth.
up. So we don't have anything from the Board of Health?
You don't, right,
Right,
yes.
okay.
To my understanding, right now, 24 as requested is approved, is sufficient. There was discussion, the Commonwealth moving forward is looking at expanding regionalization and standardization of public health in all regions. And with that comes training requirements of all board members, health agents, et cetera. With that and with the continuous evolving health issues that keep arising, you know, meetings keep going from in-person to Zoom meetings and online meetings. So there's been a proposal to look at technology for the board members. It's in the early phases of discussion, so I have no information about what it would cost, what it would look like for the 3 members to be outfitted with it, but that's the only thing that I know that's been proposed. The only other thing I was going to bring up was we still have on there the mosquito control district, which I last found out that the person that Brian's been contacting is no longer there. So
Saw that email.
we're hoping that now we can actually find out if we're still on the wait list for that. That was the only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. The state changes, is that kind of evolving? Do you expect that will come out with some funded or otherwise mandates before the next fiscal year, or who knows?
The SAFE 2.0 was approved. It went to the governor and got sent back with amendments. And then it went back to the House, and I believe has kind of stood there for a little while. So I don't know what the outcome will be. We can't. I know from FERCOG there's a lot of push towards preparing the boards for this. Phoebe is one of the heads of the SAFE 2.0 push and the Public Health Excellency Grant. So in preparation for that, it would behoove us to, you know, get ourselves prepared and align with what training requirements will be required for the health agents, for the board members, et cetera. So I think that might be beneficial to look into.
Any questions? I mean, is that something we should together a number on?
I don't think it needs to be.
425?
I don't think it needs to be an emergent thing.
Okay.
There's no set deadlines or timeline required yet, but I do think 24 and beyond, we can look at it. I don't think it has to be like
So FY 25, right?
25, yeah.
Okay,
25.
okay. Don't worry, we all mix them up, especially lately.
Yeah.
But you think for this year we're okay, but we'll be looking
I
at
do.
it for next
I
year.
that was the only thing I could think of that I wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you. Questions? Oh, yes, sir.
Just to add to what Jeff is discussing, Erving is a recipient of one of the excellency grants as part of the region, and so you do have some funding coming to the Board of Health to support the early transition. So it's not continuity funding into the future, but to help us in 24 and maybe part of 25. So as the board identifies their needs, there may be a grant source to help mitigate some of that for us. So.
Great. Questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Other than thanks for your patience.
No worries. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll get together a number roughly for technology, just so it's a placeholder for the
Yeah.
next meeting. Based on the request. I have the request.
Just kind of offhanded with technology, I wonder if that maybe should be a larger discussion for boards. I know I bring my own laptop, but I have an entire board that's reliant on paper. I suspect some of these members might like a different avenue. I think there are several boards where that might be, and I know it's been tossed around and talked about before. I don't know if there's something like tablets or something, but I think the ability to maybe move meetings a little more digitally might be welcomed. And I just know it's come up in the past of how do you do that, and so I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
That's a good question. It has something that came up a little. I mean, the board just barely did it before COVID, and everyone got immersed in different ways. But as we are doing less of that, and we're still more electronic than ever, so. Noted. Maybe I'll brainstorm with Brian in a little bit, and we'll go from there on what proposals could look like, and bring it back and talk about that.
And then I'm just gonna throw it out there, sorry, Glenn and Mariah, their submissions look like it's a larger discussion, and I know you guys have other business, and I want to make sure that they are given the time and the due. So is it possible to move them to the 21st?
Yes, sir.
I'm not allowed to acknowledge or I would.
I was just gonna say, out of respect to everybody's here, I know the board has other business, and it's 9:30. I'm willing to wait for the 21st. That makes it easier for everybody.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I feel bad. Both of you have been waiting.
I know you've been waiting on
the whole night to do this, and
Perfectly fine.
for some of you, it's not the first time this has happened. You know, that it's late and we don't always get to everything.
Do we have the bandwidth on the 21st?
We'll make the bandwidth, because although we said like in the next 60 days, if we're really trying to pull something together, is having a draft by the meeting after. So, like warrant and such. So, I mean, we will push other things out, or we'll have another meeting in between.
Yep.
For other business.
I mean, I've still been checking randomly to see if Scott's off button got pushed yet, so.
Not yet. It's close.
He hasn't quite gone. Cannot think of that movie. Anyway, thank you, Glenn. Mariah.
I can be here the 21st, but is it possible that we could have some of the IPML discussion tonight? Just there's a couple parts of it that it would be helpful to hear from you all tonight, and we can wait on the rest.
Sure.
But, I mean,
Let's do it.
you guys up for a little bit longer, or no?
Yes.
Okay. I assume I didn't hear it, but I'm assuming we noted Dan rejoined after. So, okay. Come on up, Mariah. Thank you, Glenn. We are going to take you up on that offer.
Outside with me then?
Yes, sir.
right.
We'll put you on early for. We'll start with you and Mariah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at my memo that I sent you all specifically on the IP mill. There's a lot of overlap between my budget requests and the IP mill, but the IP mill really needed its own category. The biggest thing that I need to know right now is if the select board wants to re-release the RFP simultaneous to considering demolition. We did have a new party reach out that is interested. I'm still gauging how serious that is. They're going to be doing a tour this week. And I guess if they are seriously interested and they say that if we put out an RFP, they would respond, do you all want to do that? I wouldn't recommend that we stop these conversations about demolition because I think that we need to keep moving forward on that. But we do have the RFP that we drafted last time, and if you all just wanted to update dates, I think it would be a pretty easy push.
Yeah, I was going to say the legwork on updating the RFP that was done last time is minimal to get it put out there.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, if there's somebody out there that we think, even if it's not viable, even if they respond back and it's not even a response that makes sense or it's not one that we would go with, but just to put it out there one more time, $4 million is a hefty price tag to tear something down, where if we can have an RFP that finds an interested party, I'm all for it. There's minimal cost to put out the RFP again and run it for one more time. So.
You could lose your building 8.
What was that?
You could lose your building 8.
I'm willing to accept that. I will take that.
Severe negotiations. No,
Yeah.
I'm frustrated that I'm going to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's the reality we're in right now. It's not housing, is it?
No.
Okay. Because I just don't know that even if it's a viable proposal that we would
Yeah,
have
it's
community
the
support to do
unfortunate
it.
reality that we're
So,
in.
I don't know. I'm a little on the fence, but like, doing something simultaneously isn't a negative necessarily. There's not a huge cost in it. I don't think the timeline works. I'm not ready to say tonight. I'd want to hear more back after they visit that they're serious and something more.
So my thought is, even if it's not them, the industry, it's cyclical. So there may not have been a lot of responses the last time we put it out, but those that didn't have the capacity or bandwidth to take on a major project at that time, maybe now they do. And you never know if somebody else might respond, even if it's not this one person.
I guess the reason that I gave this very tight timeline was because you're all considering having an STM the last week of September. And if we came back, I mean, obviously we're not gonna, the September 25th, we're not gonna like decide to move forward, but we would at least know if we had proposals to consider. I guess I'm a little concerned that if we wait, we'll go through with an election and a town meeting for something that we may not need. Again, not the end of the world. I think everyone would be thrilled to get that money back if so, but I think it might inform the responses if we had an answer around the same time. And I also know that Jim wasn't on the board the last time we released it, so I don't know if you have any input on the proposal or on the request for proposals. So like maybe you want to take a look at it and not release it this week, because I think there's pros and cons to both.
I've read through it. I've solicited some, or I've had some opinions solicited to me. Look, if we can dodge this $4 million bullet, sign me up. I have, based on my former professional experience, I have concerns about that facility as is, but if we can get out from under it, I'll listen, I'll entertain any reasonable and legal opportunity.
Well quantified. Other thoughts?
I think we owe it to the residents to explore every possibility that we can for that site, and if we're able to potentially partner somebody with someone and maybe do some selective demolition. I know, as Mariah has explained in the past, we have a better shot if we are working with someone to maybe get some grants to work towards that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, we owe it to the community to look at every possible option as to what we could do with that site that would reduce our spend on it. And so I think the cost of putting out an RFP is negligible compared to a $4 million demolition bill.
And we have budget for that, for the RFP.
Yes.
Sorry. Quantify what I was saying.
Yeah.
We have budget for putting out another RFP.
Yes.
I'm fine with the timeline of seeing the draft warrant for the 21st and putting it forward.
Wait, what? So the proposed timeline is that we're saying go tonight and that's it. It goes as it was, updated for dates and calendar type adjustments as opposed to a full review of the original it's the original RFP adjusted for time, right? Right. Am I saying that right?
Well, I'm certainly in favor of attempting to do something that saves taxpayers $4 million, or $3 million, or $2 million. And I don't know if it's the appropriate forum to discuss it, but there may be other alternatives to add to the RFP that might encourage others who have an interest. So I'll let you know offline what that might be, and you can do what you want with it, but I'm certainly in favor of proceeding with the RFP to see if there's some alternative to spending all the money to tear it down.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but that was pretty cryptic, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I have not reread it in the last 30 days. I thought it was pretty open to any proposal. It had some preference for certain types, but I thought it was non-exclusive.
Correct. Well, let me ask you, if a proposal comes in, is there legal wiggle room to negotiate with folks? Or just, this is what it is, and that's it?
I guess I don't quite understand. Negotiate on price or on?
Just whatever. If you're going to sign a contract with somebody, usually you can negotiate terms of the contract before you sign it. They'll come
So-
up with a proposal, we might say, well, we kind of agree with that, but
So in the RFP, there's a draft land development agreement, but that would be part of a negotiation between the proposing entity and the select board to finalize if that's what you're talking about.
okay.
But the language has already been drafted as part of that proposal, so anybody submitting understands what the board is thinking about and would be able to include proposed changes to that in their proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the same as like an RFQ where it is this way and that's it,
Okay.
right? This is a proposal that it's more complex, but really simplified, as I understand it. If we felt it was viable and chose to want to move forward with said proposal because it was the one, or it was the one of many that we felt was most advantageous, because that's our grading, then the specifics of what a contract, the long-term lease agreement, the expected milestones and deliverables that's moldable, right? That's what comes out in the final agreed contract. But the proposal is just, I say just, it's very large, but it's the framework of what they're saying they would do, exactly what that will look like, in a 1/20th model and measurements for the rooms and whatever. That's more in the final contract and
But
negotiable.
to clarify a little bit more, if you're talking about negotiating something that would put it outside of what the RFP even said our base, request is, or what we're looking at, no. We'd be, if we told everybody, these are the parameters,
Yeah.
and we went with one, and then we said, well, thank you, we're gonna go with this one, and we're gonna change the parameters now, any of the other people are gonna say, time out. Those were not the parameters that I'm aware
Yeah,
of.
that's kind of what I was
I
thinking.
should have been part of that conversation as well, so.
But the RFP that we put out is very broad.
Yes.
So it's not limited to like one use. And the other thing is that the proposal is really a concept. From there, they're going to be, they have to get they have to talk to the planning board. You know, like there's going to be adjustments that are made along the way. So I don't know exactly what you have in mind, but yeah, there's kind of a container, and then within that, there's room to.
I mean,
wiggle.
what I have in mind, I guess, I might as well just say it. You have one person who's expressed an interest, and perhaps others will, I don't know. But an alternative to the taxpayers of Erving being put on the spot to spend $2, $3, $4 million, might the taxpayers of Erving support spending some of our money towards refurbishing this place so that people are going to reply to a request or proposal, say, gee, you know, the town's willing to put in something, I'm willing to put in something. If, say, we're putting in a few $100,000, maybe not a lot, pick a number. If we're willing to put in something to help, to save the taxpayers $3 or $4 million, is that an outrageous thought? And if you don't put it in the RFP, you're not going to negotiate it later.
So what you're describing is something similar to a Community Preservation Act funding arrangement, where a community has money set aside for redevelopment opportunities, and will make that as part of the offer, the eligibility to apply for those funds. You all have not adopted that provision, so we don't have a mechanism like that. Could you appropriate money towards that? I think you could. It's got to be all voted and vetted by the voters to make sure there's a very clear understanding of what they're doing, because in the end, you likely will not own that property. So whatever you're going to spend, whether it's to demo or to refurbish, you're gifting or selling at a very low price to a private entity who will then benefit from those investments. So it's not that you can't do it, but that's very complex.
And or an EDC, right, an Economic Development Corp type thing where you're partnering. That's
better
even more
option.
complicated. That's better, but it's still very complex and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I think it's challenging for towns that are as small as Erving to do some of what you're talking about, just because we don't have some of the legal infrastructures for it. But for things like demolition, like Deb was saying, sometimes it can be more advantageous when I'm applying for funding if we can say we have a person who said that they are on board to take on this property, but in order for them to move forward, we need to demolish X, Y, and Z. So there can be some of that. Like we might be able to put up money for demolition, have some grant funding. So there might be wiggle room there. I think I would encourage anyone who wants something like that to put in a proposal.
Okay.
And then it can be determined whether it's feasible or not, rather than avoiding putting in a proposal because they're not sure.
Can that go part of a, I don't know, if it's a cover letter with these proposals kind of thing, or an explanatory thing that the town
It's all
might-
explanation.
the town
It's
might-
a whole binder full.
It's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
And we note we already have some funding for demo, like that can, depending on what it is, be allocated, and we can potentially partner in terms of helping get grant money and things like that. It's, it's private-public partnership funding,
Yeah.
but that's not taxpayer money, so it's a little easier to do. So.
And they can apply for grants too.
Right.
Well,
If they're a nonprofit, they're often eligible for a lot of the same grants that we are.
Okay, well, however, you're the expert at accomplishing it, I'm not. just obviously. But the thought is, if people believe the town has something that'll sweeten the pot a little bit, it would encourage more people, perhaps, to send a proposal, more than just one.
Agreed.
And
Right
I
now we
would-
have
and-
$600,000 to sweeten that pot, so.
Yeah, and I really, I certainly can't speak for every person in town at all. But I think most of them who would come along to vote would say, gee, I'd rather spend $500,000 than $4 million.
I hope so too, Dan.
So, okay.
Yeah,
If
I
it
think
were-
it's
if it
pretty
were coming.
open-ended to your point, but it doesn't hurt to put one in. The worst that happens is we say it doesn't work.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So key takeaway is we're going to put something out.
Yes.
I think key takeaway is there a motion to update the dates and reissue it.
Motion to update the former IP mill demolition and redevelopment RFP as amended with new dates.
Is that the right due date is the only thing I'm going to ask before we move it forward, the 25th? Is it too much to request it a week sooner?
I think the soonest we could release this would probably be next Wednesday, right, the 16th?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Which would
earliest.
give, it would be just about a month.
Could we do the 20th? like that Wednesday.
I suppose we could always do the 20th, and if somebody comes back and says, can
I
we
need
have
a-
an extension, we can always extend it.
Right.
We can do it by
Oh,
agenda.
we could do a preferred due date too, right?
What?
We can do a preferred, no,
No, we
you
have
want
to
a firm?
confirm. We have to have
Fine,
firm.
Yeah.
Fine.
But we can issue an addenda to change the
If we need
deadline
to, sure.
if the feedback is it's too short.
Okay.
I would go any shorter than 4 weeks though.
No, I mean, that's 4 weeks from the site visit, so.
Right.
When we're talking timeline, you winced. Is that,
It's not a small ask, what we asked for in that package. It's gonna be a binder probably of every
Right.
proposal that comes in, so they're gonna need time with an architect and whomever they would work with to put their performance together to look at the financial package that makes sense for the project.
so it's
That's
more a
it.
heavy lift for them than it is for you?
Yes.
It's not a heavy lift for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's for
It's
them
on
to
that.
The
put it.
timing is really because if a proposer doesn't already have an architect and an engineer and
Right.
their whole team already set up, they need to find those people, get them on board, figure out a site plan if they don't already have one. If someone has, I mean, we didn't have anybody who had already done a proposal, but like say we had somebody who was resubmitting, it wouldn't be a big push. But if someone's looking at this for the first time, I don't think that 4 weeks is going to be reasonable. But I do like the idea of having it due in 4 weeks because then we will know if we have no responses. If someone reaches out and says, I want that to be extended, we know that they're interested and we can extend it. So I think that actually is a good idea.
Well, 4 weeks from the site visit. It's not 4 weeks from release. It's actually 6 weeks from release. 20th, I believe. Am I counting those weeks right? 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry.
Well-
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
5 weeks, 3 from, okay, sorry.
Can I just interject for 1 second?
Mhm.
My migraine is really getting the best of me. So could we either end the joint session or I'm gonna have to go, which will kill our quorum, so.
Could I ask one question for you? I don't want to keep you here all night, but.
No offense, Dan, your question is not going to change whether you guys aren't voting on it at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
okay.
The board
You're
is.
right. Okay.
You're welcome to add your comment, but I will just close the joint because it's not going to be a decision for the joint group.
Okay.
Right? We appreciate your input and I welcome it still, but the board ultimately decides on the RFP. So move to adjourn the joint at 9:45.
Second.
And
All those-
continue with the select board meeting?
Yes.
And continue the select board meeting.
Second still stand.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Yes.
My question is the crunch of a timeline for our convenience for our September 25th scheduled town meeting? Is that what the timeline crunch is? Which
In
would-
terms of short, yeah, that's why I was asking the question, like if we get, I'll think to what you started to say, if we get interested parties who want to request an extension, and I think putting that on there to say, like, do we, somehow convey that maybe if there's questions at some point that we would accept an extension if you need it? If you're really interested, at least we'll know. If no one asks for an extension, we don't have any proposals. On the 20th, we know what we're going into a special town meeting with.
Yeah.
And that's why, because I think we're probably going to be running these pretty much simultaneously or pretty close to.
Yeah, it's not ideal timing, but it would let us say, if we don't get any responses, it would let us say to the voters, we've
Try
gone
one
out
more
twice.
time.
Because I put out a survey, I was really happy I got 40 responses. A lot of them were, leave it until a developer wants to take it down. And while I really appreciate that those people took their time to offer that feedback, I don't know that people understand the severity of what that means. So I think it would be helpful to be able to tell people at town meeting, either no one is interested, or someone might be interested. Do we then choose to have the town meeting vote but hold off on the election, or whatever that, or skip over that question, or, I don't know that we're gonna necessarily have a cut and dry answer.
Well, I asked the question, just the thought, that if I was somebody who might want to look at something, and I got this thing says we need to reply in 4 weeks, and I just said, I didn't even close it, forget it. I didn't want to look at it.
I think most of the developers of that caliber, that are that size, would look at that and ask for, are you hard fast on the date, or can I do an addendum for
Okay,
an
I'll
extension?
leave that up to you folks. Okay.
Normally, I would agree, but I think in this case, I would rather do that than put this out and not have any idea if anyone is interested until after the special town meeting.
Okay.
Because a lot of
hard-
times people will download it and you have no clue if they're working
Yeah.
on it or not.
It's hard to ask people to vote on whether or not they want to demolish something for 4 million when you have pending RFP
Right.
possibilities that you haven't heard back from yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be like,
Vote on,
why-
vote
well,
on
let
this,
me
but
know
we
when you
might
get the
not
answer,
know.
and then
Yeah.
I might vote on it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I hear you.
Was there a vote on that motion?
So there was a motion.
No
and then there's
second?
clarification, there was no second. So
Yeah,
I'm
and no
assuming
vote.
it died.
Okay.
So we need a clarification on the date.
I'm just asking. We haven't 100% firmed up the special either. We just
Correct.
know it's a tight timeline, and we have a tax rate to set, and there's all those things that start backing up the longer we delay. Doesn't mean that we couldn't do in October, whatever. I don't know,
We
fifth
do in early
special town
October.
meeting, but I was just asking the question if people feel strongly it should be 6 weeks. We want to move it to the
30th?
27th instead of the 20th. The RFP due date.
27th.
I'm just throwing out numbers. But I'm looking for you guys to what you're comfortable with, knowing that we have to then back that up with the.
Yeah, I was going to
Special.
say that. Well, the bottom line is we have to make sure that we have enough time after that date to make sure that we have enough time to hold a special in order to set the tax rate
And an election,
and an election, which are 35 days apart.
or they're run simultaneously,
Yeah,
which we talked about doing.
yeah, we have talked about that.
Which some people like and some don't, for all valid reasons.
So you're talking, if we waited till the 27th and the first week of October, still gives them enough time to set the tax rate. The next
Because
week.
you move to a preliminary system. We just have to have everything done in November so that we can
Right.
prepare for December.
So as long as we're in that first week in October, that gives them a few weeks to pull everything together after it's set. Yeah, I think if the 27th is more advantageous, then
6
do it.
weeks.
So, just to clarify, we're not going to have the STM that week of the 25th.
We hadn't say that. Yes, I guess if we're serious about the RFP, then no.
We'd have to push it by 1 week.
We'd have to
Okay.
push it at least 1 week.
So if we get proposals the 27th, and then you all would likely want to review them, at least preliminarily, before the STM.
Yes.
So that, like,
Which means that we've said many times, we will hold a meeting on a Thursday.
Whenever we have
Okay.
to.
We
If you
could
have
hold
to.
a meeting on the 28th.
Okay.
If all of a sudden there's 4 responses that come in and,
If they're due at 3 p.m., we'll look at them that night. I mean, whatever. If we had to, it'll be really raw.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Whatever.
I think, yeah, if you're, I guess the thing I'm getting at is if you're willing to do that, I am obviously willing to make that happen. I just wanted to make sure that you're
Yeah.
giving yourselves enough time to look something over before you have to talk to the public about it too.
Appreciate that. 27th, whether we have an STM on the 2nd, the 4th, the 9th, the 11th, we can find some time in there to have a meeting and review what we need to review. If there's a lot to review,
that's a good
I mean,
thing.
we'll probably have some sense as we
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a site visit. You're gonna have people asking questions. We'll have some
We'll know how
some
many people
idea if there's
downloaded it,
something.
yeah.
So we've still got a little time to set the dates.
Okay. And before you make that vote, do you also want me to include language about requesting an extension, or just leave that off and people will assume that they can if they want to?
I think if we're putting it out at the 27th, that's 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think
Just
I
leave
think
it.
people can say they need more if they need more.
Okay. And then in terms of advertising, just do kind of the traditional, what we're required to do. I think it's the central register, in the recorder, and online, and at town hall.
Correct. And then we always send it to as many developers as we
Right,
can
I
find.
forward them to everyone I can find. But I know that the last time we released it, we did extensive advertising. I don't think that that's necessarily useful in this case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not that we wouldn't do it or spend the money, but it didn't really garner a big difference in our response. So I don't know that it's
Yeah.
worth investing right now for this one.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. I don't think, in this economy, I don't think we need to be hunting after fringe players. There's people who are going to
See it.
have the capital to do it, and there's people that aren't.
Yeah.
And those that have it will be looking.
Okay. So that was a motion to release, to do 9/27?
Yes, that's my
2023.
amended motion.
The rest of the timeline is hopefully the 16th, and you figure out what has to be in between.
Okay.
That's appropriate. Is there a second?
Okay, so that motion's out there.
Yes.
I will second
All
that
right.
motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will cram a whole lot in the next 6 weeks.
Because we're gluttons for punishment. Thank you.
Yeah.
Be careful what we wish for. We'll get like 5 propulsions
Oh
back.
my goodness. Well, I'd
Stacks
rather
this high that we're going
I'd
through.
rather recommend
You know
we
what?
pass over and have to come back because we don't find one after looking through them.
Yeah,
Than not having to look through.
fair enough.
It is what it is. We have to pull another STM for that specific topic. Okay, with that, we got through everything else,
Yeah, just
except a bunch of the
executive.
budgets, but those will be back next week at 7. We have our 6:35. If we need to have another meeting in between to clear up other business, we'll let you guys know. We'll find the time.
Okay.
The one beyond that, just tentatively, did we already talk through that? Did 21st, and then did we say 11th?
Nope.
We did not?
21st was our last one that we,
Okay. 4th is a holiday. I don't want to wait till the 18th, so I don't know if we want to do you want to play it by ear and do something midweek if needed, and then of the 4th, and then come back, or do you want to tentatively plan for the 11th and the 18th?
You all floated maybe something that week, and then
Yeah.
remaining on your every other week schedule.
Right.
I can't remember if you said the 6th.
Like the 5th or 6th, something like that?
I think, yeah.
I probably said the 6th because usually I can't do Tuesdays.
Yeah, Tuesdays are tough, so I'd rather, if we're gonna
Wednesday?
tentatively put one in, we'll put it in for Wednesday the 6th and see where we're at.
Yeah. I
Okay.
can do that.
Okay. Tentatively Wednesday the 6th with 7 o'clock. Be okay? Oh, wait a minute. Let me think. Yeah, for
6:35?
6:55? No. All right, tentatively 7. If I can pull 6:30, I'll let you know.
No, that's fine. If
Okay.
it's yeah,
It'll be, I mean, in theory, it'll hopefully be a shorter business thing.
that's okay. Later is better for me too. But before 9.
Please.
And then we would assume to continue our regular schedule, which would be the 18th, following that. Barring all this other fun stuff we're adding that we'll have to fit in. Okay, with that, I move the board goes into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares, which I do. American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Water and Wastewater Unit. And then immediately following executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares, I do. New England Benevolent Police Association, Local 121, Police Unit 12. Is that 121? 121. We will not return to regular session. Is there a second?
Second.
Brian, will you call the roll? All those in favor?
Selectman Moing,
Aye.
Selectman Bastoresh,
Aye.
Chairman Smith.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.